Mastering the Lightning of Hogwarts. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyright or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 126. Dormitory Inspection. The principle of the echo charm is similar to that of a bat. It emits high-frequency sound waves, which are refracted and bounce back to form an actual image. It has strong penetrating power, and the transmitted image is also very accurate. Even if there are obstacles blocking it, it can still go over the obstacles to explore. It is very effective in exploration, tracking, and reconnaissance. For example, if you want to survey that terrain or conditions underwater or at the bottom of a lake, you can use this spell. The people in the audience heard Anduin explaining with some strange words. They didn't understand what he meant at all. They just thought he seemed very powerful. If they asked others to clarify, they would seem uneducated. So they had to pretend to know and listen. Anduin paused, and then said, "Of course, there were many problems when developing this spell. This spell has two parts: sending and receiving. Currently, the spell can be cast directly with a wand, but receiving is a little more troublesome and requires magic props made in combination with alchemy." After that, he took out a large mirror with a diameter of 1 meter from his space bag. This was made by him some time ago. The materials were not very good. The spell only lasted for about a year, but it was more than enough for demonstration. Anduin controlled the magic power to make the mirror float in the air, facing the people present, and then waved the wand to cast the echo spell. As the spell was cast, another scene soon appeared on the mirror. It was also the scene in the club room, but the mirror was completely composed of black and white lines. After using magic to mobilize, the scene in the mirror began to change, up or down, left or right, front or back, and began to move as the perspective in the picture was adjusted. In this mirror, every corner of the room can be observed. Then Anduin opened the window of the room again and continued to cast the echo spell. Soon, the scene outside was slowly presented in the mirror. Of course, it was all made up of lines, just like using a drone to shoot against the wall and the ground. Although the image quality was worse than black and white video, it could also clearly present the image of the outside world, including trees, walls, stone pillars, etc. Everyone in the room came to the mirror and watched Anduin's demonstration carefully, including Professor Flitwick. "It's amazing, Anduin, this new spell is even more amazing than expected. You have to work harder and try to translate the spell quickly, otherwise many wizards who are interested in it will not be able to cast the spell." Professor Flitwick praised him without hesitation. Seeing the dazzled Oriana, she was also secretly surprised at this time. Such a magical spell was actually real, and the effect was better than expected, which made her look at Anduin more. But Anduin still had a calm expression and just nodded modestly to Professor Flitwick. After seeing such a wonderful magic demonstration, the people around him applauded enthusiastically. At this time, they were really conquered by Anduin's talent. Everyone discussed the echo spell for a long time with great interest. Anduin also answered everyone's questions very humbly. He liked the atmosphere in the magic club very much. There was no intrigue, only infinite love for knowledge and a serious and rigorous research attitude. This academic discussion lasted for a long time without knowing it, until Professor Flitwick called a halt, interrupting everyone's unsatisfied thoughts. After all, it was curfew time. If they continued to stay, it would be bad to be discovered. After saying goodbye to everyone reluctantly, Oriana was still ready to talk to Anduin, but he disappeared as soon as she turned around, so she didn't say a word to this acquaintance all night. He is really a rude guy. Seeing that she was like an outsider, Oriana pouted angrily and turned away. On the other side, when Anduin returned to the Slytherin dormitory and was about to do his homework that night, there was a rude knock on the door. Bang! 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 "Open the door, hurry up." Along with the knock on the door, there was also a loud urging voice. "Oh? Are you making trouble so soon? Are you still looking for death?" Anduin thought for a moment and had a bottom line, so he packed his things and waved his hand, and the door lock was unlocked. Bang! There was another loud noise, and Wilkes kicked the door open with a forceful kick, walked into Anduin's room arrogantly, and after looking around, he saw Anduin sitting leisurely at the desk flipping through a book, without even looking at him, and he couldn't help but feel angry. "Why are you so slow? Today is the first time the committee will check the dormitories. You are such a muggle that you are not honest at all. I advise you to be smart and hand over the muggle items on you and in your room. Otherwise, you will find me, right?" Anduin interrupted Wilkes and looked up at him with contempt. Wilkes was interrupted and his face turned pale. At the same time, he heard Anduin's provocative words and couldn't help but think of what happened last school year. He was so angry that his teeth itched, but he didn't dare to fight directly here. First, fighting in the common room would definitely alert Dean Snapley, and he would not have a good result then. Second, he found that he seemed to be unable to beat Anduin. Thinking of this, Wilkes frowned, looked at Anduin seriously and said, "This is the work of the Slytherin Purity Committee. Don't interfere with official duties. We won't do anything to you if you cooperate with the work honestly. Stand up quickly and let us search you. If we find any contraband on you, you will be the first to be in trouble. Body search. Interesting. What if I say no? What do you want to do? Your committee has not been recognized by me." Anduin couldn't let these guys touch him. There were many things in his space bag that could not be seen by light. HMPH, you don't even follow the rules of Slytherin, and you dare to talk back. Travs, who was following nearby, stepped forward and glared at Anduin. The Purity Committee is the common choice of Slytherin House, and it's not up to you to tell it what to do. Wilkes also nodded and said, "Yes, since you were in Slytherin House, you have to abide by the rules of Slytherin." After hearing what the two said, Anduin actually smiled with his eyes narrowed, stood up and walked towards the two all laughing. Wilkes and Travs were so scared when they saw Anduin approaching that they took 2 steps back, but then they remembered that they came as a symbol of Slytherin, so they straightened their chests and walked up to him. Chapter 127. Sheep in the tiger's mouth. If you ask me, don't you have any other excuses? You keep saying that you represent the college. You will make others think that Slytherin is full of uneducated trash. Anduin walked up to Wilkes, patted his shoulder, and said in a serious tone. Wilkes was trembling when Anduin patted him on the shoulder, and goosebumps appeared on his body. Although he wanted to stay away from Anduin, he still held back. Just as he was organizing his words and thinking about how to refute him, Travs next to him spoke. "Anduin, let go of your dirty hands. As a noble who values pure blood, the rules of Slytherin were originally made by us." "What? Do you want to challenge our authority?" Travs nauseated when he saw Anduin's frivolous expression, and yelled at him angrily, and his voice even reached the end of the corridor. With Travs' support, Wilkes also cheered up a lot. He shook off Anduin's hand on his shoulder and said with a stern face, "You can't do whatever you want here. Think about the price of not following the rules. Why don't you stand aside and accept inspection?" Hehe, rules. I like this word, but I don't think it's necessary to follow unreasonable rules and rules made by the weak. Don't you want to be inspected? Come and try. If you are strong enough, I don't mind following the rules. Anduin's expression gradually became cold, and his eyes stared at the two people. Then he thought about it and the door behind that two people creaked and closed instantly, and quickly locked it. Travs and Wilkes were frightened by this scene, and hurriedly pushed back a few steps and shouted, "What are you doing? Who gave you the courage to come to me for trouble? Once you went to my door, it won't be so easy to get out." Anduin sneered, then slowly approached the two people. "Don't come over here, open the door quickly. Do you dare to fight in Slytherin? Casting spells on classmates in the academy will get you expelled." Travs looked at Anduin and shouted nervously, "You are not injured and you won't bleed. How can you say that I fought you, and I need to cast spells to deal with you?" Anduin looked at the two and smiled evilly. Travs knew that he was in a dangerous situation today, but he didn't intend to surrender, so he quickly drew out his wand and prepared to strike first. But Anduin was faster than him. Travs only felt something flashing in front of him, and the wand in his hand disappeared. Wilkes beside him was in the same situation. Unfortunately, before the two could react, Anduin had already grabbed their wrists, and then pulled them back hard, and then pulled them down, using the technique of grappling to throw them to the ground. Then he slapped them directly on their soft spots with 2 bangs. Ah! The two felt a sharp pain in their sides and could not help but cry out in pain. Anduin used soft power, so that no injuries would be visible on the surface, but it would be difficult for the two guys to stand up in the next few days. Then he gave them a full set of dislocation treatment, removing their arms and pressing them back, pressing them up and removing them again. After several times, Travs and Wilkes were already limp on the ground in pain, and they didn't even have the strength to wail. "Really, you can't stand a beating at all?" Anduin curled his lips in disdain. Throwing the two out of the dormitory door, Anduin said to them lightly, "Tell Yaxley that if he wants to deal with me, let him do it himself. It won't be so easy if he dares to bother me next time." After that, he slammed the door shut. The two people lying in the dormitory corridor at this time didn't even have the strength to get up. In the end, they were discovered by several other pure-blood wizards and carried to Yaxley. Yaxley watched as several people carried Travs and Wilkes to his dormitory, and looked at them with some dissatisfaction. Why, he dared to attack you in the dormitory? Wilkes, who was still panting, looked at Yaxley and said quickly, "Yes, that mutt blood is too rampant. He dragged us into his dormitory and beat us up without saying anything. You have to take charge of us." Yaxley stepped forward to check the two people, and then asked curiously, "Where did he hit you? Why can't you see any injuries on your body?" Hearing Yaxley's question, the two complained one after another, but in the end, they found that Yaxley's expression became more and more strange. He doesn't take us seriously at all. Now let's get everyone together and go and teach him a lesson. Travs was furious when he thought of Anduin. That means he beat you up, but he didn't leave any injuries on you. If we go to him like this, he will definitely not admit it. Then let him go, then we will be beaten for nothing. Wilkes said excitedly. Don't worry. We can't go too far in the academy. That guy handled it so well. He obviously knows this. And I asked you to check his dormitory today mainly to see how flexible he is. Since he is so tough, we can't let him go so easily. Yaxley sneered. What do you mean? Wilkes asked with a frown. Don't worry about Anduin for now. You're responsible for managing the other little wizards, especially those half-blood wizards. As for Anduin, you must not do anything in school. I don't believe he can keep shrinking in Hogwarts. We will catch him one day. Yaxley calmly arranged the work. Although the two wanted to beat Anduin right away, they had to calm down after hearing what Yaxley said. In the next few days, the Purity Committee did not bother Anduin again, but they struck hard at other young wizards. Under the banner of official authority, they searched the students' dormitories and confiscated many muggle items. The other young wizards were not as brave as Anduin, so they had to swallow their anger. Vivian was furious. Almost all of her mahjong tiles were confiscated, making the mahjong club she founded almost dead in name only. The members of their club also had deep opinions about this, but they dared not speak out against Yaxley and others. Many Slytherin students were like this, only caring about protecting themselves. As long as they were fine, they didn't care about the lives of others. Yaxley and others also took advantage of their mentality, winning over a group of people and suppressing another group. Those half-blood wizards were commanded by them every day, but they still didn't dare to say anything when they were bullied. In Anduin's opinion, the mentality of these little wizards is a bit like the Jews during World War II, smart and capable but submissive, and they have never thought of resisting, just hoping that they will not be bullied. Anduin found that the Pure Blood faction's surveillance and tracking against him had begun again, but it was much more secretive, and mostly concentrated on weekends. Are they counting on me to attack me when I go out of school? How can I not see such an obvious intention? The third-year students have a benefit, that is, they can go to Hogsmeade on weekends. It is the only pure wizard village in the British wizarding world, but the little wizards must get the signature of their family guardians if they want to go there. Anduin did not leave Hogwarts for the entire summer vacation, and as an orphan, he himself had no guardian. Considering his situation, Professor McGonagall very considerately agreed that Hagrid would sign for him as Anduin's temporary guardian. Chapter 128 Weird Atmosphere. But even though Anduin had permission, he did not rashly go out to Hogsmeade on the weekend. Now the school is his safe haven. With the actions of those pure blood wizards, even a fool knows that these guys are going to attack him outside the school. And they will definitely be ruthless. You are looking for an opportunity, but I am also looking for an opportunity. Rosia is almost done. We have to wait a little longer. What's the point of playing with these little wizards? If you want to fish, you have to fish for big fish. Anduin thought to himself. After thinking about it, he came to the Forbidden Forest hut and waited quietly. After a while, Higgs, Charles, and Vivian arrived, and Charles actually brought someone with him, who was Bill. Brother Anduin. Bill had not seen Anduin since the opening ceremony. When he saw him, he couldn't help but run towards him excitedly. This was Anduin who asked Charles to bring Bill here. After thinking about it, he felt that he had to include Bill in his training plan. Since he came to Hogwarts, he had to take good care of the Weasleys children. When Charles learned about Anduin's plan, he raised his hands in approval. He was addicted to being an assistant coach, and he could command Vivian and Vera and Higgs to train with a straight face all day long. Seeing Bill smiling and greeting Anduin, Charles also showed an ambiguous smile on his face. After explaining to Bill that he wanted him to train together, Bill readily agreed. In his opinion, Anduin wanted to give him special treatment and take him out to play. What was there to refuse? Then very quickly, Bill hated his decision. As soon as the get out of class was over in the afternoon, the excited senior Charles dragged him to the forbidden forest hut. When they got there, he began to teach him how to stand, and then extended endurance training. After this set of operations, he basically couldn't get up. On the other side, Charles, Vivian and others actually had to practice steps, target practice, spell casting, etc. He was stunned. Is this the training content waiting for him in the future? Will such high-intensity training really not cause sudden death? No matter what Bill thought, as soon as Anduin entered the training state, he would immediately transform into the Hell Instructor mode. As long as someone made a mistake, he would immediately scold them, even girls like Vivian. However, the effect of this training was still very obvious. Bill found that he had made great progress in both his perception of magic and his speed of mastering spells. After he gradually kept up with the training rhythm, Bill found that his physical fitness had also improved greatly, and his mental state was much better than before. As time went on, the atmosphere in Slytherin College became more and more weird. After Anduin's warning, Vera and Higgs no longer directly opposed the wizards on the committee. Anduin went out early and came back late every day, shrinking all day long, which made the pure blood factions think that they must be afraid, and their behavior became more and more unscrupulous. When a person has power, is no longer bound by rules, and has no self-control, it is the beginning of his ambition to expand. These guys are obviously not self-disciplined. Since their operation to remove Muggle items went smoothly, they gradually oppressed the space of half-blood wizards. Wilkes completely controlled Slytherin's Quidditch team and banned those clubs involving Muggles. In addition to Vivian's March-On Club, there was also a reading club organized by a half-blood wizard, and a Muggle Studies Club, which was just a learning club organized by several little wizards who took the Muggle Studies course, but it was also revoked. Wilkes even threatened them to change their elective courses. Anduin has always been very curious about why their dean, Professor Snape, did not take care of it, but except for the potions class, he rarely saw the dean, who seemed not to be in the school often. The whole Slytherin spent more than 2 months in such a depressing atmosphere, and after such a long time, the conflict still broke out. That day, Anduin was still training Charles and others next to the hut, but what was very strange today was that Vivian had not come. Velen said that Vivian had gone back to the common room to put her books, but she would not let people wait so long normally. Anduin was still wondering if Vivian was too tired because the training was too hard. After all, she was the one who complained the most about the hardship and tiredness, and she was always lazy and slacking off. Anduin had no good way to deal with this, so he simply let her be the atmosphere group, so the pressure on her during the usual training was not very great. Just as he was thinking about it, he saw Vivian appear, but she was accompanied by a little wizard, who was Ibrahimovic Gambler, who he had seen before. Ibrahimovic still had tears on his face and a sad expression, while Vivian looked indignant. Anduin approached and found that one side of Vivian's face was slightly red and swollen, and it looked like she had been beaten. "What's going on? Did someone hit you?" Anduin and others saw this and hurried forward to ask. After seeing the others, Ibrahimovic seemed to think of something wrong, and burst into tears again. What else could it be? "Those guys are too bullying, they didn't even let a first-year wizard go," Vivian angrily told everyone the whole story. It turned out that in the Slytherin lounge, the guys on the committee found a photo of Ibrahimovic's grandmother. Because his grandmother was a Muggle, the photo was confiscated by those guys. Little Ibrahimovic was unwilling to agree, so he argued with them, but Ibrahimovic was just a first-year wizard, and there was no room for resistance. In front of Ibrahimovic, the guys threw his grandmother's photo into the fireplace and burned it to ashes. Chapter 129 Love Campus. Vivian, who was back in the lounge to put her things, happened to see this scene. With a sense of justice, she immediately rushed up to argue. When the 6th grade female prefect Millie Osp saw that Vivian, a half-blood wizard, dared to stand up for Ibrahimovic, she started arguing with Vivian, but with her poor vocabulary, she was no match for Vivian and was directly sprayed with dog blood by Vivian. Seeing that she couldn't win the argument, Millie started to fight. At first, they just pushed each other, but later the two of them became more and more angry and started fighting. Then the scene was like they fought like old women, pulling hair and slapping each other, but unfortunately Vivian was weak and could only run away with the little Ibrahimovic. HMPH, don't worry, I didn't suffer any loss. To be honest, the training during this period was really not in vain. I scratched Millie a few times, and that guy pulled my hair and it hurt a little. Vivian obviously suffered a loss, but she still boasted to everyone. Charles felt distressed when he saw this, and he went forward to lift up her hair to check the wound on her face. This action made Vivian's face redder, and she could only turn her head away awkwardly. After crying for a while, Ibrahimovic asked Anduin in a reserved manner, "Senior, did I really do something wrong? Is it really a sin to have Muggle blood? But when I was a child, those Muggle companions, except that they could not do magic, I didn't think they were any different from us." Seeing this, Anduin knew that these little wizards had been brainwashed by these pure-blood wizards, and they began to doubt themselves, and he felt a little uncomfortable. Don't listen to them, those guys are just looking for a sense of existence. If you have the guts, let them go to trouble that Dean, he is also a half-blood. Vivian, who was asking Charles to help treat her injuries, said angrily. Yes, some people are just looking for an excuse to oppress others. Even if Slytherin is full of pure-blood wizards, they will find other excuses to cause trouble. Anduin nodded and said, Anduin, we can't go on like this. Now Slytherin is in a mess because of them, and the Dean doesn't care. We can only rely on ourselves. Velen on the side also interrupted at this time. Yeah. Anduin calculated the current preparations and turned to look at Higgs. How were the reactions of those half-blood wizards now? What else can they do? They have been looking at the face of the so-called committee every day. They have long been dissatisfied in their hearts. But you also know that the little snakes in Slytherin will not resist blatantly. At most, they will complain privately. But if those guys are unlucky, they will definitely applaud. Velen said in a deep voice. Anduin did not respond to Velen directly, but looked at Ibrahimovic. Gangball, Ibrahimovic, stop crying, you have to learn to protect yourself. From now on, you will come to me every day with Vivian and Velen to receive training. Remember, only the strong have the right to speak, otherwise no matter what you do, it will be wrong, understand? Ibrahimovic nodded. What happened today also made him understand a lot of things. Seeing Vivian was injured for him, tears could not help but flow in his eyes, but after thinking of Anduin's words, he forced himself to hold back. Anduin took out the white fresh potion that he had prepared in advance and asked Charles to treat Vivian's wound. Bill next to him had been watching. He only knew that Anduin seemed to be saying something extraordinary just now, but he didn't dare to ask, so he could only stay obedient. After experiencing this incident, Anduin calculated the time and it was time to take action. What he wanted was not just this kind of small fight in the school, but to go to the Death Eaters outside the school. He could just take advantage of these little brats who like to make trouble in the school. At this moment, Headmaster Snape of the Serpentine College was in the headmaster's office, talking to Dumbledore. Severus, is there any news about those guys? Dumbledore looked at Snape, who was very haggard because of frequent visits to Hogwarts. Since they started to flee a few months ago, I have explored several safe houses that were originally set up, and the results are not great, but I seem to have found the trace of one of them. Snape said calmly. Who is it? Igor Karkaroff, that guy is a wimp, and why do I have to do these Aurors work for you now? It's not an easy thing to run back and forth between the outside world and Hogwarts every day. Snape complained. I know you've worked hard. Dumbledore raised his eyes and looked at him. But if these fugitives are not arrested, they will easily stir up new trouble. The Longbottoms incident is a lesson. Without the you-know-who, those guys will act even crazier. After all, you once had contact with them, so I can only ask you. I will ask Moody to follow your clues to take action, but you will have to spend more time on this. Humph, I knew I was on your pirate ship. I won't talk about the things outside the school, but what about the situation inside the school? Snape stared at Dumbledore with a sharp look. What do you mean? Dumbledore asked with a puzzled expression on his face. Don't say you don't know that Yaxley and Wilkes are stirring up trouble in Slytherin College, and why do you want me to approve Wilkes' status as a prefect? That guy is simply a reserved Death Eater, and Yaxley, I even suspect that he has joined the Death Eater camp. Snape asked. Ah, you mean this? Dumbledore pushed his glasses on the bridge of his nose and looked at Snape playfully. I will give a chance to every child attending Hogwarts, and the same goes for Yaxley and others. If they can seize the opportunity to sever ties with the Death Eaters, I will be very pleased, but if they can't, what do you mean? You still want to follow their lead to find those Death Eaters? You are simply making a joke of the safety of the other little wizards. Snape shouted at Dumbledore angrily. Don't worry. After observation, I found that they have not shown any particularly violent tendencies. If they really go to extremes, I will stop them. Severus, sometimes the less restrained the environment is, the more you can see a person's true face, right? What about Anduin? As a Slytherin wizard born in Muggle, I can feel that those guys want to eat him alive, and there was a conflict between them. That guy didn't leave Hogwarts for the whole summer vacation. You don't think that's because he loves the campus? Snape frowned and stared at Dumbledore. Today on Xinjiang, plus one more. Chapter 130. Another Vivian. I thought you hated that guy. Dumbledore raised his eyebrows and smiled teasingly. You have to have some confidence in him. Anduin is a cautious and smart child. The most rare thing is that he also shows a good sense of justice. After all, a little wizard who can fight a potion professor on equal terms. I don't think we need to worry about him. That's because I held back from the beginning. Snape said angrily after being mocked by Dumbledore. That's equivalent to an adult wizard holding back, isn't it? I also want to know what he will do in such an environment. Dumbledore said. You still want to test him with this kind of thing? Be careful not to play with fire and get burned. Snape glared at Dumbledore angrily after speaking, then turned around and walked away with his sleeves swung. In the empty office, Dumbledore's eyes seemed to penetrate the distant void, and he muttered to himself. Maybe, but I don't want to train another Dark Lord. Anduin, in this situation surrounded by enemies, what choice will you make? On the other side, Anduin, who returned to the castle, found Rosier and handed him a small bottle of potion after whispering. What do you mean? Do you really want to go this far? Rosier looked at Anduin in disbelief after hearing what he was told to do. I have been preparing for so long, and I asked you to come up with the idea of the Purity Committee for him, isn't it just for now? Otherwise, do you think you can have such a high position in his heart? Anduin said with a sneer. But if you fail, I will be finished. Seeing Anduin's insistence on his own way, Rosier first thought that if Anduin was taken down, he would be dragged down. You are not qualified to negotiate with me, and it is too late for you to regret now. Remember what I said, think about the consequences of disobeying me. Anduin did not care about Rosier's defensor, nor was he afraid that this guy would turn against him at a critical moment. He prepared many plans for this plan. Rosier looked at Anduin with a slightly resentful look as he turned and disappeared from his sight. He should not have provoked this guy in the first place. He even listened to his nonsense and instigated Yaxley to set up a committee. In the end, Rosier sighed, but Anduin was right in one thing, that is, it was too late for him to regret now. He shook his head helplessly and turned back to the common room. What did you say? Anduin will go to Hogsmeade at Christmas. Are you sure? Yaxley asked Rosier, who came over. Yes, I overheard it when Anduin was chatting with Vivian. It is said that Vivian and Viren are also going to stay in school during Christmas. Maybe they can't hold it back after staying in Hogwarts for too long. Rosier reported to Yaxley truthfully according to Anduin's instructions. Ha ha. Yaxley laughed, his eyes shining. That kid really can't help it. Vivian and Viren, right? Scum always hang out with scum. Yaxley paced back and forth happily, and turned to look at Rosier again. Well done, Rosier, but this news needs to be confirmed again. Let's wait and see. If those two guys also apply to stay in school during Christmas, then it can be confirmed. This time we must not let this troublesome guy go. Rosier could only agree at this time. The Christmas holiday was approaching soon, and in addition to Anduin, Vivian and Viren also applied to stay in school during Christmas, which also made Yaxley confirm the certainty of Rosier's news. But Yaxley and the others did not apply to stay in school during the holidays. After all, that would be too obvious. Soon during the Christmas holidays, Yaxley and other pure-blood wizards all boarded the return train, but did not sit to the end. Instead, they secretly got off at Hogsmeade village station and gathered at the home of a young wizard living in Hogsmeade, waiting quietly. How is it? Is there any situation? Yaxley, who had been waiting in Hogsmeade for 2 days, asked the two young wizards he sent to investigate. We found something. We saw Viren and Vivian. The two of them are now staying in the Three Broomsticks bar, and they seem to be waiting for someone. I guess Anduin will go over to meet them soon. The young wizard in charge of surveillance said. It's not easy for us to take action in a place where wizards gather like that. Wilkes said on the side. Humph, I'm prepared. Look who that is. Yaxley pointed to the side with his hand. Wilkes looked along his finger and saw another Vivian. What is this? Hectares, quick, you can't even recognize me. Another Vivian appeared and said with a mocking expression. Millie. Is this your polyjuice potion? Wilkes only reacted at this time, and immediately circled around Vivian in surprise and observed. Yes, the previous Vivian dared to contradict me, and I pulled out several dares. Now it can be put to use. Millie's transformed Vivian said proudly. I said I was prepared. When Millie and Vivian had a conflict last time, I had this idea and asked Rosia to prepare the polar juice potion. Now it's time to use it. Yaxley was very proud of his foresight. The surrounding little wizards also gave their leader rainbow farts at this time. However, Travs on the side poured cold water on him and said, what if Anduin doesn't fall for it? That guy is very cunning. Are you sure you can seduce him? Then we'll have to see how good Millie is at acting. Millie, is that okay? Yaxley looked at Vivian and asked. Don't worry. Dealing with a little brat is nothing to me. It's a waste of time for us to make such a big fuss just to deal with a mudblood. Stop talking nonsense and act according to the plan. Millie assured arrogantly. Don't underestimate that guy. According to Wilkes's intelligence, that kid is quite powerful and can cast a special kind of barrier magic. Besides, we have to be careful in doing things like this and not be discovered, so we have to clean it up neatly. Yaxley explained. Chapter 131 Gift. But everyone still looked uninterested after hearing this. Many of them were encouraged by Yaxley to come here to deal with muggles. After all, why not go home for Christmas? After seeing everyone's expressions, Yaxley shouted, Rosia. Then everyone saw Rosia coming out of the inner room with a big box in his arms. He opened the box and found bottles of potions inside. He had arranged for Rosia to prepare them a few months ago. What is this? Stimulant potion. Wilkes asked after opening a bottle and smelling it. Yes, these potions can increase your resistance to spells and boost your spirits. It's a benefit for you. It's worth your waiting here for 2 days. Yaxley took the big bottle of potion handed over by Rosia and said proudly after putting it away. Everyone was delighted to see the potion. They divided it up in no time and then prepared it energetically. And Vivian also hurriedly set out to wait on the path outside the gate of Hogwarts. This is the only way to Hogsmeade. After a while, Vivian found Anduin walking out of the school gate and heading towards Hogsmeade. After seeing this, Vivian immediately put on a happy expression and ran to meet him. Anduin, Anduin. Vivian came to Anduin and called out loudly. Anduin was obviously stunned when he saw Vivian's appearance, and then replied, What's wrong? Didn't I ask you to wait for me at the Three Broomsticks? When Viren and I were on the road, I thought that you had never been to Hogsmeade. I was afraid that you didn't know the way there, so I decided to wait for you here. Vivian, played by Millie, made up a lie without blushing or beating her heart, and said it very naturally. Oh? Anduin squinted his eyes and looked at Vivian, then smiled and said, Really? That really made you worry, let's go. Seeing that Anduin was so easily hooked, Vivian couldn't help but feel a little contempt for this guy in her heart. Travs always said how cunning he was, but this? She had prepared several lines of speech but they were not used. Anduin was moving outside the school under the guidance of Vivian. Vivian led the way silently in front, and Anduin followed with a smile on his face. Why are we getting more and more remote? Is this the way to the Three Broomsticks? Anduin asked after glancing around the surroundings. Vivian heard Anduin's question and her heart tightened. She didn't expect Anduin to answer himself. You guys are not going to do some Christmas surprise or something like that. Such a foolish routine can't be hidden from me. Anduin didn't look at Vivian's expression and said to himself. I didn't expect you to expose it so easily. Vivian replied after a few awkward laughs, and she couldn't help sweating in her heart, and then glanced at Anduin with contempt. Is it worth Yaxley to spend so much effort to deal with such vigilance? In this way, Vivian led Anduin to a corner outside the village. There were several abandoned huts scattered around, and a cemetery not far away. The ground was overgrown with weeds, and the wall paint of the house next to it had even fallen off. When Vivian led Anduin to an abandoned hut, she found that Anduin had stopped. What's wrong, Anduin? Vivian asked with a puzzled expression. Anduin lifted the monocle in front of him with his hand, looked around, and showed a sarcastic smile. 17 people, it's a big scene, it's a nice Christmas surprise. Vivian was stunned for a moment, and said to Anduin beside her with a stiff expression, What are you talking about? Come in with me, I have prepared a big gift for you. You are too ugly, you don't need to give me this gift, let me get it myself. Anduin didn't wait for Vivian to react, he turned sideways and kicked Vivian's knee quickly, only to hear a click, and then a right swing punch hit Vivian's face hard. The force of the punch sent her flying more than a meter away. She didn't even have time to make a sound, and she turned over and fell heavily to the ground, unconscious. At this time, after falling unconscious, Vivian had a strange change. Her face was distorted and her body shape began to deform. After a while, the original Vivian returned to the appearance of Millie Osment, the head girl of the 6th grade. Obviously, Anduin had already noticed that there was something wrong with Vivian beside him. Pa. 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 Just after Anduin put Millie down, there was a round of applause behind him. Beautiful, Anduin, can you answer a question for me? When did you realize that the Vivian beside you was not the real one? Of course I recognized it from the beginning. The real Vivian would not talk so little. Anduin didn't even need to turn around to hear that the person standing behind him was Yaxley. Oh? Yaxley showed a mocking expression. Then you dare to follow me alone? Should I praise you for your courage, or should I say you were overestimating yourself? You invited me here to chat with me, right? If you keep talking, I will even mistake you for Vivian. Anduin scratched his ears and laughed, but he still did not turn around, because he just used the echo spell to detect that most of the enemies were concentrated in the front. Seeing that Anduin did not fall into the trap, the people guarding in the broken house also came out one after another, constantly spreading around him, gradually surrounding him, and staring at him viciously. Travis was so excited that his face flushed. He smiled grimly and said, "You can't run away today, you dirty bastard. I'm going to dig out your disgusting eyeballs." Wilkes also looked at Anduin mockingly, but he didn't forget to remind everyone, "Stop talking nonsense, hurry up and don't alarm others. You know, although this place is remote, if this kid sends a signal for help, someone will still come. Don't worry, I cast multiple shielding spells here in advance. I learned this from this guy. Even if you blow it up, no one can hear it, and no one can save him. You know, Travis has been preparing for event for a long time." Yaxley looked at Anduin, who couldn't fly away, and couldn't help but asked with a smile, "You haven't answered my question yet, Anduin, who gave you such courage to follow me? You know, we originally prepared several plans for you, and the polar juice potion is almost the worst one. I didn't expect that Millie, that idiot, could actually lure you here. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 132 Ambush. At this time, Anduin looked at the wolves' gazes around him and said lightly, I just don't want to make too much trouble. It's more time saving to solve the problem at one time. Besides, Anduin paused, I haven't left Hogwarts for a long time. I'm a little short of money recently. After hearing Anduin's words, everyone saw him smile coldly and disappear in front of everyone. Hurry up! Wilkes shouted hurriedly. It's the disillusionment spell, flying sand and rocks. Yaxley reacted very quickly. As he waved his wand, a cloud of dust mixed with stones exploded in Anduin, and the flying dust splashed around. A figure was looming in the sand, but everyone found that the figure was very fast and had already approached Wilkes in front of him. Wilkes saw Anduin rushing to his front so quickly, and quickly raised his wand to attack. Seeing this, everyone around him also fired evil spells at the figure, and various spells and evil spells rushed towards the figure. Front teeth are like clubs, fall to the ground, petrify all, repel quickly, but Wilkes saw that the figure was like a nimble fox at this time. He first turned his head and dodged a curse shot at him. In his eyes, the petrification curse was only 1 or 2 centimeters away from Anduin's face, but he still dodged it calmly. After calmly dodging the curse, the figure ran in front of him in an instant. Wilkes didn't know what Anduin's expression was at this time, anyway, he was panicking. Wilkes seemed to have received a heavy blow in the abdomen, and then he was grabbed by the collar and thrown behind him. At this time, the evil curses fired by everyone also arrived, and they hit Wilkes, who was thrown out. The few evil curses that passed Wilkes were easily deflected by the figure with a magic wand. Wilkes, who was hit by several evil curses, had long teeth on his mouth at this time, and his body was stiff and his face was ashen. He collapsed in the encirclement. The fog is thick. Everyone heard Anduin chanting for the first time, and then saw a thick fog appear, blocking everyone's vision. The besiegers faced this situation for the first time, and several of them were obviously a little nervous. They blindly fired evil spells at the direction where Anduin was before, but it was obvious that their accuracy was worrying under this visibility. Most of the evil spells missed, and the few that hit fell on their own people instead. Ah, damn, who is hitting me? That Mudblood is opposite me, he just fired an evil spell at me. For a while, everyone was in a mess. The little wizard who was attacked fought back in the direction where the spell flew, and the wizard who was accidentally injured cursed loudly. Suddenly, all kinds of evil spells flew in the thick fog, and spells hit the little wizard from time to time, but basically they were accidentally injured by their own people. At this time, a figure appeared and disappeared in the thick fog, and then someone screamed, and the little wizards who were close to him were instantly knocked down. In just a few seconds, several people who participated in the ambush fell down. Some were attacked by the lurking Anduin, and some were accidentally injured by their companions' evil curses. Seeing this, Yaxley shouted loudly, "Calm down, everyone, and stop casting spells." After shouting, he immediately mobilized his magic power and cast a powerful hurricane spell to try to blow away the thick fog. Under Yaxley's spell, the thick fog gradually dissipated, and everyone could see the current situation in the venue clearly. The 17 pure blood wizards who originally participated in the ambush were only 11 standing at this time. At this time, a vague figure could be seen approaching behind a wizard, holding the man's shoulder with one hand and holding the wand against his neck, and then the paralysis spell emitted from the wand instantly paralyzed him, and the wizard also lost his ability to move. At this time, Anduin's disillusionment spell was basically ineffective. He held the paralyzed wizard with one hand and raised his wand with the other hand to point at everyone. With your little courage, you are not worthy of learning how to ambush others. You have no tactical coordination and are slow to react. I am so naive that I actually thought you could cause me some trouble. Anduin looked at the remaining 10 people, and did not hesitate to use his talent for ridicule. Seeing Anduin showing up and daring to ridicule them, they could not help but launch an attack again, and immediately several evil curses were shot at Anduin. Anduin just flicked the wand in his hand, and several young wizards who had fainted beside him flew up under his control, facing the attacking evil curses, and at the same time used the senior wizard in his hand as a shield to resist the flying curses. A wizard saw that the curse he cast was blocked by the figure thrown at him, and the remaining force was still hitting him. He quickly used the levitation spell to push the flying wizard away. As a 5th-year student, he was quite strong. The spells he cast were basically silent spells, so he could handle it easily. But just when he wanted to breathe a sigh of relief, he found that a stun spell was approaching. It turned out that the figure just now blocked his sight, but he didn't expect Anduin to push these unconscious wizards to hit them and cast a spell at the same time. When he pushed the figure away, he found that the stun spell was too late to dodge. With this move, 2 more wizards were heavily knocked away. Everyone gather together, don't give him the opportunity to defeat them one by one. Yaxley was no longer as arrogant as he was at the beginning, but he still remained calm. Anduin watched the 8 people in front of him move quickly and gather into 2 teams. He nodded in his heart. That's right. Fighting in a small team sequence can improve the attack efficiency. But doing this in front of me is simply courting death. He sneered and waited for you to gather together. He pushed away the wizard who was used as a shield, took off a metal button on his chest, and threw it to a group of people. At the same time, the snake eyes on the silver snake brooch on his body lit up slightly, and the spell contained in it was activated. A spiritual light enveloped Anduin's whole body. But the button suddenly erupted with a strong silent wave after it approached the crowd. The 4 people who had just gathered together were instantly dizzy. Anduin found the right angle and blasted out 2 quick repel. The huge force generated by the repel spell hit the 2 wizards, and then the continuous impact force brought them to hit the other 2 behind them. In an instant, the 4 people were knocked away and fell to the ground unconscious. Although the other team gathered by Axley and Travs was some distance away from them, they were also affected by the infrasound spell, and several of them felt their brains were in chaos for a while. I don't know why the chapters I sent out are always wrong. Sorry. Chapter 133 The Loser Eats Dust. But Yaxley was worthy of being the best among the prospective graduates. He still cheered up and barely maintained the iron armor spell, blocking several repelling spells fired by Anduin, and persisted until the negative effects of the infrasonic spell subsided. Anduin saw that Yaxley still had the strength to resist, and couldn't help but nod slightly. He had a strong willpower, and he was a good material for being a soldier. Unfortunately, his position was different. Don't blame me for being ruthless. Under Yaxley's cover, the 3 people behind him gradually regained their sanity. Another 7th grade wizard took out a bottle of stimulant potion and drank it for himself and the other 2, which barely eliminated the swelling pain in the brain. Anduin lightly tapped the silver snake brooch on his body to remove the sonic repelling spell on his body, and just watched them adjust their status calmly. In the previous battles, he basically relied on tactics and equipment advantages. Now he was ready to directly defeat these people's psychological defenses. Yaxley also took out a potion and drank a big gulp of the stimulant potion. At this time, he gradually cheered up. Looking at the scattered people around him, he couldn't help but feel bitter. He originally thought that it was too much trouble to mobilize a large number of troops to deal with the mudblood in front of him, but he didn't expect that this would be the result. Your condition has recovered, right? The next half is coming. Come on, let me see what the pure-blooded wizards with noble blood are capable of. Anduin held his wand upright in front of him, then bowed slightly and made an elegant dual salute. Damn it, if it weren't for these cunning actions and alchemical props, do you think you can still stand here and talk to us now? Trav still had an angry expression and said hatefully. Hee, the loser eats dust, you must know this truth. Anduin looked at Travs with contempt. This guy has not made any progress in all these years and can only speak sweet words. Travs was about to fight back when he heard this, but was interrupted by Yaxley. Yes, in this world, the winners are the kings and the losers are the bandits. Anduin, I have to admit that you are a respectable opponent, but for the sake of our great cause, there must be a truce today. Anduin couldn't help but raise his mouth slightly at this moment. He had been holding back for a long time and was thinking about venting his anger. Then he instinctively analyzed the current battle intelligence. There are 4 opponents. 2 7th-year students are the main threats. In addition to Yaxley, the other one's fighting spirit is not bad. A 5th-year student, whose reaction speed was acceptable before, and a 3rd-year Travs, a waste, can even be used as a distraction. Yeah, I understand. In the eyes of the other 4 people, Anduin's eyes were as sharp as knives at this time, and there was a crazy sneer on the corner of his mouth. He looked like a bloodthirsty villain. The 7th-year wizard on the side swallowed his saliva and whispered to Yaxley, what should we do next? What else can we do? If you don't have confidence in a 4-on-1 situation, you might as well go back and learn magic again. Yaxley was also looking at Anduin with a serious face at this time, but he knew that morale was very important now, so he could only comfort him nonchalantly. Travs on the other side couldn't keep calm at this time. He had just experienced a shameful battle, and his brain was hurt by the infrasonic spell. In addition, under this tragic atmosphere, he couldn't help it. Quickly imprison. Travs took the lead in starting the battle, and cast a confinement spell, which turned into a magic chain to bind Anduin. Flocks of birds. Anduin calmly cast a spell, and then saw a dozen slightly smaller ravens being summoned, and under his control, they surrounded him. The birds summoned by the general flock of birds spell were all flying around like idiots. The stronger ones could only control them to complete some simple commands, such as flying in a certain direction. But in the hands of Anduin, who has a very high proficiency in control magic, the ravens he summoned seemed to be connected with his thoughts. One of the ravens rushed towards the chain as if it was precisely guided. The magic chain tightened instantly after contacting the raven, crushing it, but this attack was easily resolved. Yaxley and others were disrupted by Trav's rash attack, but now that the war had started, they had to launch an attack quickly. All petrified, fainted, out of the hole the 3 of them used their best spells to attack Anduin at once. They didn't dare to use area spells like thunder explosions or blazing flames. After all, there were a lot of their companions lying around. If they were injured or killed by them, let alone anything else, the families of these little wizards would not let them go. Facing the attacks of several spells, Anduin still handled them calmly. 2 more crows flew out from the flock around him to meet the petrification spell and the stun spell, and then he lowered his hand and cast a spell stop to turn the transformed snake into ashes. But Anduin was not just passively defensive. As soon as the aura of spell stop shot out from his wand, his wrist rolled up the wand flower like a symphony conductor, and with 2 whooshes, one to the left and one to the right, 2 spells were shot at everyone. A clear water like a spring shaped a water ball at the size of a wash basin and shot at the 4 people, followed by 1,000,000 bullets. Seeing this, Yaxley instinctively raised an armor spell, but before the water ball had touched the armor spell shield, it was hit by the volley of 10,000 bullets fired by Anduin. Bang! The huge water ball exploded violently like being hit by a large caliber shotgun, and the splashing water droplets flew all over the sky. Most of them splashed along the protective shield, soaking several people like drowned rats. Just when they thought Anduin's action was inexplicable, another spell was shot at them at high speed, and it fell close to the ground and landed at their feet. As soon as the spell landed, a burst of cold air broke out. It was already winter, and being covered in cold water was already very cold, and then they encountered this cold air. This cold air condensed into ice in an instant, and everyone turned from drowned rats into popsicles. The last spell fired was a special technique developed by Anduin for the freezing spell when he was studying temperature magic. He called it the extreme freezing curse. Yaxley and others were caught off guard by this, and they were hit in just a few seconds. The four of them were shivering from the cold, and their lips were blue. Invulnerable to water and fire, another 7th grade wizard at the side reacted quickly and used a spell of invulnerability to water and fire, which slightly isolated the temperature, making the few people feel a little better and stopping the spread of the cold, but they were still freezing. Chapter 134 Killing Curse. Spread out, don't let him attack your area magic. Yaxley realized that gathering together would make it easier for Anduin's magic to hit, and their attack spells were all fired from the front, so the opponent's defense pressure was too low. After hearing the order, several people immediately moved to both sides, and occasionally fired a few spells to interfere, but the flock of birds beside Anduin was like an arm, and every time a spell came, a small bird would fly up and die together. The mist is ethereal. Seeing that several people dared to disperse, Anduin used the same trick again. No, come closer quickly, don't let him defeat one by one, wind whirl. Yaxley was so angry at this time. As soon as they dispersed, this guy would use this trick, but they had no way to do anything. Anduin, this bastard, was too weird. He was like nothing happened in the thick fog. They couldn't see him, but he could see them. They had to quickly use the hurricane spell to blow away the thick fog, and then shouted to everyone to get closer again. It took 5 or 6 seconds for Yaxley to finally blow away the thick fog, but there was one less person to return to his side. When everyone's vision was completely clear, they found that the 7th-year wizard had fallen to the ground just a few meters away from him. The remaining 3 people who were still standing were livid at this time, and they felt that their mentality was about to explode at any time. Travis was already tortured by Anduin and could only yell hysterically while firing spells at Anduin. In this mixed emotion of fear and anger, the power of Trav's spells was significantly enhanced. But unfortunately, his heart was already in chaos at this time. He lost his calm and not only had a worrying accuracy, but the intention and trajectory of the spells he fired were also too obvious. Anduin didn't even launch a flock of birds, and just moved a few times to avoid all the attacks. Then Anduin cast a stun spell and hit Travis, who was standing too prominently, and knocked him away heavily. Now there were only 2 people standing in front of Anduin, a 5th-year wizard and Yaxley. At this time, the 2 of them were breathing heavily, looking at the calm Anduin in front of them. Although they were still the side with the advantage in numbers, they could not help but feel a trace of despair in their hearts. Come on, 3rd round, please. Anduin gently stretched out his hand and made a gesture of invitation, staring at the 2 people expressionlessly. The 2 people opposite him looked at each other at this time, and both of them could see fear and panic on each other's frozen blue faces. At this time, Yaxley could no longer maintain his initial calmness and composure. Yaxley gritted his teeth and shouted at Anduin. Anduin, you forced me to do this. Avada is biting the big melon. Yaxley gradually fell into madness. Now he didn't care about the consequences of casting the killing curse on a little wizard. As if to cheer himself up, he roared before releasing the poisonous curse. Hectares, I thought you wouldn't take the bait, but I didn't expect you to be so stupid. Anduin seemed to have been prepared to defend against the killing curse. The flock of birds on his body instantly gathered into a group and crashed into the green light. At the same time, he quickly stepped aside and hid beside the trajectory of the killing curse. At the same time, Anduin fired 2 obstacles at a very fast speed, which severely knocked the remaining 2 people away. The killing curse only destroyed a few birds that crashed into it before losing its power. Of course, even if this poisonous curse could penetrate the obstacles, it would not be able to hurt Anduin, who had already hidden aside. The 5th-year wizard was hit high by the huge force, and his whole body was full of pain. However, his mind was still shocked by the scene of Yaxley casting the killing curse just now. How dare he openly use the unforgivable curse? This was simply seeking death. But before he could think clearly, he lost consciousness. Seeing that all the wizards in ambush had been knocked down, plus Millie disguised as Vivian, a total of 18 enemies were unconscious. Oh no, it should be 17 people. Wands fly. Dozens of wands flew into the air and fell into Anduin's hands. The scene of Christmas 2 years ago was still vivid in his mind. He had to disarm immediately after each battle. This was a lesson he had learned. After confiscating all the wands, Anduin walked to a lying figure, kicked him hard, and said, "Get up quickly, don't play dead." Rosier, who had been lying on the ground pretending to be dead since the beginning of the fog, said ouch and quickly got up from the ground. "You don't have to kick me again." Although Rosier had been lying on the ground pretending to be dead, he had been paying attention to everything that had just happened around him. Anduin almost knocked down all the dozen people who besieged him with a crushing force, which made him feel scared and shocked. Fortunately, he did not choose to betray Anduin, otherwise he would definitely suffer. He could not understand Anduin's current strength at all, and Yaxley actually dared to openly use the unforgivable curse, which no one had expected. Rosier stood up and looked at the people lying on the ground. He swallowed and said, "What's wrong? You've dealt with them all. Why don't you leave?" Based on his understanding of Anduin, he would quickly clean up the battlefield and evacuate after each battle. Anduin took out 2 bottles of potion from his waist bag and threw them to Rosier, sneering, "It's not over yet, why are you in such a hurry? Drag these guys to the abandoned hut and feed them some potions I gave you." Rosier took the potion bottle with a bitter face. He didn't know what Anduin was going to do, but in this situation, he didn't dare to disobey his orders and had to do it one by one. After Anduin finished speaking to Rosier, he took out a communication coin and slowly input magic 3 times. This was what Anduin had agreed with Velen and Vivian before. Sending 1 message meant nothing happened, 2 meant something unexpected happened, and 3 meant everything went well. It was also a signal for them to retreat. Then Anduin quietly walked to Yaxley and squatted down. His movements were very obscure as if he was doing something. "Yaxley, please don't let me down," Anduin thought as he fiddled with something. Wilkes felt that he had a short but long nightmare. He dreamed that he and Yaxley and others were ambushing Anduin, who dared to despise that pure blood family, but as soon as the battle started, he was beaten into a pig's head by various spells cast by his own people. Was this a dream or reality? Wilkes felt that his consciousness was gradually awakening, and then the pain all over his body began to gradually flow into his brain. It hurt so much, and his head was so dizzy. Who am I? Where am I? Chapter 135. Head and hands. Wilkes shook his head, which was in pain like paste, and gradually opened his eyes. In a trance, he saw a scene that he would never forget in his life. In a dimly lit shabby house, there were many people squatting in the corner. After careful identification, he found that this was the shabby house where they planned to ambush Anduin. The guys squatting were his previous companions. Why was there Yaxley in the crowd? He turned his sight and saw the handsome boy looking at him indifferently. "This is Anduin." Wilkes finally reacted at this time. What happened was not a dream. Looking at Anduin who was staring at him, Wilkes sat up quickly, groped around, and tried to take out his wand to fight back. In the previous battle, he only had time to use a spell before he lost consciousness, but unfortunately, it was not as he wished. After searching for a long time, he found that not only was there no wand, but even the bottle of white fresh potion he had prepared was gone. Awake? If you were awake, get up quickly, put your hands on your head, and squat down. Anduin shouted at Wilkes who looked confused. Wilkes opened his mouth, but he had no idea what was going on. Of course, it was not his fault. He fainted at the beginning of the previous battle, and he was also the most seriously injured. He was the last to wake up. It was not an easy thing to be hit by more than a dozen spells. Anduin saw that Wilkes had not reacted yet, so he kicked him and shouted again. "Didn't you hear me? Get up, put your hands on your head and squat down. Didn't you see that your companions are squatting?" Wilkes glanced at his companions squatting in the corner. They all had Simmer's expression now, so he had to follow and do it honestly. "Okay, it seems that everyone has woken up and it's time to talk." Anduin looked around the squatting crowd and said, "Anduin, this time we're in trouble, and you have taken away the wand. What else do you want?" Yaxley raised his head at this time, staring at Anduin with eyes full of resentment. "You're still asking me what I want? I want to ask you what you want." Anduin sneered. Then Anduin walked to Wilkes who had just squatted down, clamped him with one hand, and whispered, "I'm a little wizard, I just want to study honestly in the academy, but I'm discriminated by you for no reason. Isn't this inappropriate?" Wilkes, whose shoulder was tightly pinched, was confused at this time. "It was Yaxley who was arguing with you, why the hell did you pinch me?" He didn't know how to respond to Anduin's words at this time. He could only look at Yaxley blankly, but instantly felt the right hand clamping his shoulder suddenly exert force, and he immediately gritted his teeth in pain, and had to shake his head at Anduin. "Well, being discriminated by you was not enough. It's you who have troubled me 3 or 5 times, and it's you who followed me. It's not appropriate to target me like this. Anduin glanced at Wilkes, then looked around at everyone, and his sharp eyes made everyone lower their heads. Wilkes suddenly felt his shoulder ache again, and had to shake his head at Anduin again. Okay, I've been tolerant of you time and time again, and you forced me to stay in Hogwarts. It's even more inappropriate to be ambushed by you when I come out to spend Christmas. Ouch, Wilkes cried out in pain, looking at Anduin with fear, shaking his head like a dice cup. So as a victim and a poor little wizard who has been oppressed for a long time, it's normal for me to resist you excessively and ask for some compensation, right? Anduin let go of Wilkes, squinting his eyes and staring coldly at the squatting people. Rosier, who was also mixed in the crowd and holding his head, heard Anduin's words, and felt a chill in his heart. This guy didn't just cheat me, he was actually going to attack all the little wizards, and then he was secretly happy again. Why am I the only one who is unlucky? Damn, let's die together. Yaxley, who was standing next to him, didn't understand what Anduin said at all. He asked in confusion, what do you mean? What do you want to do? And you said you were a victim, but we are the ones squatting here. It means that from now on, you all have to listen to me. I decide what you can do and what you can't do. Anduin explained calmly, word by word. What? Listen to you? You're a mudblood and you want us to surrender. You were just dreaming. Yaxley was furious and shouted excitedly. Hee, what we are doing now is not a peace talk, but I am threatening you. Are you crazy and don't understand the situation? Anduin corrected. Yaxley was so angry that his face turned red. He stood up and protested, how dare you be so self-righteous and openly threaten so many young wizards? If I report it to the dean, it will be enough to expel you. This is impossible. If you have the guts, just kill us. Do you dare? I dare not kill anyone, but I am very sure you dare. You just cast the killing curse on me in public. Have you forgotten? You are still thinking about reporting to the dean. Do you want me to report to Headmaster Dumbledore about your attack on students in the same school, or the fact that you used the Avada Kedavra curse? You should know the consequences of using the unforgivable curse. You are the principal offender for using the killing curse on others without authorization, and they are accomplices. Now your wand is here with me. Do you need me to use a flashback charm to confirm it? Anduin did not pay attention to Yaxley, who stood up. He just glanced at everyone and continued to put pressure on him in a slow and cold tone. Hiss, the young wizards around took a deep breath when they heard Anduin's words. The unforgivable curse is an extremely evil and cruel magic. If it is used on a person without authorization from the British Ministry of Magic, the person will be sent to Azkaban for life imprisonment. Yaxley. How dare he? This kind of spell can be used quietly when no one is around, and no one will find out, but using it openly is simply courting death. Now it's miserable. A group of wizards have illegally gathered and intend to murder Muggle wizards. They have even imagined the headlines of tomorrow's Daily Prophet. This time, they are really hurt by Yaxley. Yaxley's face was pale at this time. He quickly glanced at the squatting people to the left and right, opened his mouth to try to explain something, and at the same time wanted to see if there was anyone willing to support him. But the young wizards around were all silent. Many of them joined the committee just to enjoy a superior status. This was also what Yaxley promised them. Bullying Muggles and half-blood wizards is fine, but killing people? Even if they were given 8 courage, they wouldn't dare. Chapter 136 Good Friends. Yaxley was now alone, his mind was blank, but he still stood there stubbornly, staring at Anduin fiercely. It seems that you are still stubborn. Next, let me introduce a good friend to you. Anduin chuckled. After that, Anduin reached out and took out a 4-fingered brass knuckle from his waist bag, and then slowly said, My friend is called Return My Beautiful Fist, which is made of a Greba alloy. I have enchanted the 4 ends with the Pain Increased rune, and at the same time, the 2 sides are engraved with the powerful Healing as new spell. I promise that even if you are beaten by my friend for a year, you will not be injured at all. After the explanation, Anduin put the brass knuckle on his right hand and threw a riot's wing fist at Yaxley's face. The strong punch sent Yaxley flying more than 2 meters away, and he fell heavily on the dusty wooden floor. How is it? Is there anything you want to say? Anduin stepped on Yaxley's head and asked in a low voice. Bah! The honor of the pure blood family is not something you can tarnish. Although Yaxley was not facing Anduin, he still spat fiercely, then supported the ground with both hands and struggled hard to get up from Anduin's feet. You are so tough, I admire people with such strong will. I hope you can stay firm, otherwise I will look down on you. Anduin smiled coldly. Then he stepped on the other's head, slowly squatted down, and then grabbed the other's right hand that supported the floor and held the fingers. Then he suddenly exerted force and broke the finger bones. Ah! 10 fingers are connected to the heart. How could Yaxley suddenly bear such severe pain? He immediately let out a scream. Anduin was indifferent to Yaxley's screams, and didn't waste time talking to him. He slowly exerted force and broke the other's 10 fingers one by one. Ah! Anduin, you bastard, kill me if you can, or I will not let you go, I will kill you. Yaxley's eyes were red with pain, and he began to curse Anduin viciously. Hee, sorry, I accidentally hurt you just now, now I'm trying to heal you. Anduin was indifferent to the other party's verbal attack, but said in a gentle tone. Although Anduin's words were very gentle, his actions were not so gentle. He raised his right fist with brass knuckles and smashed it hard on the hands whose fingers he had broken before, and actually restored the broken fingers. Your chest should have been injured by my spell just now, by the way, let me help you heal this injury. After saying this, Anduin hammered at Yaxley's chest, abdomen, and face. His fists were like a pile driver that kept hitting, one heavier than the other, and kept making puff and puff sounds. The brass knuckles in his hand can not only double the pain caused by the attack, but also double the pain of the original wound. What's more terrifying is its powerful healing effect. No matter how difficult the external injury is to treat, as long as he hits it randomly, the wound will be healed. At this time, Yaxley almost lost the ability to think. He could only feel the continuous and severe pain of being crushed by a heavy object. It was like a tabor warthog trampling on him back and forth. In addition to the pain, his hands could only feel a void, as if he had lost his hands. Listening to the tragic screams of Yaxley, the wizards who were still squatting with their heads and their hands were frightened and sweating. Their bodies couldn't stop shaking. The shrill sound kept echoing in the empty room. Because the sound was too loud and creepy, it even made people's heads swell. After continuously treating Yaxley for a few minutes, Anduin finally stood up slowly, raised his hand, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and let out a long sigh. After all, beating people all the time was quite tiring. It was the cold winter near Christmas, and the temperature in the house was extremely low, but Yaxley's sweat had soaked his whole body, and his voice had become hoarse due to the continuous high-pitched wailing. At this time, he lay on the ground with his eyes rolled up and twitched continuously. So, do you agree to my suggestion? Anduin asked the exhausted Yaxley, raising his right hand high, as if he would take action as long as he heard an answer that did not satisfy him. Yes, I agree, please, don't hit me anymore. Yaxley was crying at this time, begging for mercy in a hoarse voice. He just wanted to leave here quickly and get rid of this devil. After hearing Yaxley's answer, Anduin nodded with satisfaction, then looked at the squatting people and showed a kind smile. It's your turn next. You all have been injured a lot just now. I will heal you now. Anduin looked around and looked at Millie Osdore. Let's start with you. No. Millie looked at Anduin's devilish eyes and felt a chill in her heart. She stood up and ran to the door. She wanted to leave here, leave this damn place. But before she took a few steps, her feet were locked by an invisible force, and then she tripped hard. Then her feet were slightly lifted up, as if someone was dragging her back to Anduin. Looking at Millie's frightened eyes and swollen cheeks, Anduin smiled softly. Look at you, you were punched just now, your face is swollen, let me heal you well. After that, he leaned over and gave Millie a right hook. Ah! Millie felt a piercing pain going straight into her brain, and tears kept pouring out. Don't cry, weren't you very brave when you slapped Vivian? Come on, fighting. Anduin encouraged her, seeing how miserable she was. Then he hit her with a series of hooks. The corner of your mouth is a little broken, you need to hit it here. Look at your chin, it's all purple and blue, you need 2 punches here. Seeing this scene, everyone's heart twitched. They watched Anduin beat Millie from a pughead with purple and blue face into a beautiful woman. Not to mention the injuries on her face, even the pimples were beaten away. But looking at Millie's tears, she didn't look like she was enjoying it at all. After throwing Millie, who didn't even have the strength to cry, to the side, Anduin smiled and looked at the people around him who were sweating coldly. It's your turn next. I can't let you go back with injuries like this. If it gets out, Anduin, will be embarrassed. Then there was a burst of ghost howling in the hut. Of course, the sound couldn't be heard outside because Anduin had cast a shielding spell on the whole room. Anduin controlled and tracked back any guy who wanted to escape, and then beat him a few more times as punishment. Seeing this, the others also learned their lesson and just took the 2 punches. After a while, looking at the people collapsed on the ground, Anduin smiled and said, "The injuries are healed, now it's time for questions and answers. From now on I will have the final say over you guys, who is in favor and who is against." Everyone trembled at his look and quickly answered, "Yes, we agree." "Okay, in view of Yaxley's previous bad attitude, you must accept some punishment." I decided. Anduin's eyes turned. "How about this? Starting from this month, everyone will pay 20 gold galleons in protection fees every month, and every month you have something of equivalent value to offset it. Do you understand?" Hearing Anduin's excessive demands, these little wizards were embarrassed, but they had just been beaten, so they could only grit their teeth and agree. "Okay, thank you for your cooperation. From now on, the monthly protection fee will be paid by..." Anduin glanced around, as if he was randomly selecting something, and looked at Rosia. "Rosia will be responsible for collecting it. Don't worry, after all, I'm not a devil. After collecting everyone's protection fee, I will naturally protect everyone." "Yes, yes, yes." Everyone looked at Anduin saying such shameless words, but because of fear, they could only agree timidly. "Well, but let me be frank in advance. If you try to ask your family to help you, or want to default on the debt..." Anduin looked at everyone, then looked at the brass knuckles in his hand, and said, "Then don't blame me for asking my friend to collect the debt. Don't worry, my friend is the best at healing. He guarantees to heal injuries and diseases." Anduin really didn't lie to them. The healing spell he engraved on the brass knuckles was an optimized advanced version. No matter how serious the injury was, it would definitely be healed by a few punches. Everyone looked up at the brass knuckles in Anduin's hand, swallowed nervously, and the parts of their bodies that had just been beaten began to ache again. They nodded their heads. A friendly reminder, compared to gold galleons, I prefer some books and alchemical materials that I haven't read yet. If I am satisfied, I will even pay a premium. As for your wants, I will return them to you after you return to Hogwarts and pay the first month's protection fee. Chapter 137 Peeping. After Anduin finished speaking to everyone with a smile, he waved his sleeves and walked out of the house. After leaving the house, Anduin glanced at a corner of the shadows around him calmly. When the battle broke out earlier, he felt that someone was watching him vaguely, and when Yaxley cast the killing curse, the feeling became clearer. He could sense that there was a magical reaction in that direction. It was because of the sense of this magical aura that Anduin maintained restraint before and did not act particularly ruthlessly. It seems that these guys' behavior has always been seen by some people. Yaxley, you have to fight back. I spent so much effort to praise you high, and then I smashed you down hard. It's not justifiable to be bloodless. And everyone is staring at you, a fat bait fish. I hope you don't be so cowardly." Anduin sneered and left without looking back. Anduin had asked Rosia to suggest that Yaxley establish the so-called Purity Committee, and then drugged him, tricked him into using the unforgivable curse, and tortured and humiliated him. All of this was to make Yaxley lose his mind, let Anduin, and let him find his true goal. In the abandoned hut, a group of young wizards breathed a sigh of relief when they saw Anduin finally leave. Many young wizards even lay on the ground with their bodies linked because of their suddenly relaxed nerves. They recalled everything that happened today, and they felt like they had lost their parents. Then they looked at Yaxley, who was still lying on the ground with eyes full of resentment. They ended up like this because of this guy. "Yaxley, we have been harmed by you. Didn't you say that joining the committee was to restore the glory of pure blood? Now, where is the glory? All we have gained is shame." A senior wizard roared at Yaxley with deep resentment. "HMPH, what are you ashamed of? We are the ones who were really unlucky. You senior students will graduate soon, including Yaxley, but what about us? We still have to endure Anduin's endless exploitation." Another fourth-year pure blood wizard sneered. "This is not the end. That bastard humiliated us, which is equivalent to humiliating all the pure blood wizards. He must pay the price." Trav's voice was louder at this time, and he retorted to the wizard while enduring the severe pain. He and Wilkes were the ones who were beaten the worst just now. "Pay the price? What, do you still want him to beat you up? So many of us are not his opponents, so don't drag us down instead." The fourth-year wizard retorted to him. For a while, the group of young wizards quarreled with each other. To use Anduin's words, this is the time to pass the buck. Humans always like to blame their failures on others. Rosia, who was like an invisible man, quietly stayed aside, watching these guys, and secretly recorded the names and positions of these young wizards. This was the task assigned to him by Anduin. He remembered which of these pure blood wizards still had not given up, and which had given up resistance and revenge. After what happened today, Rosier no longer dared to disobey Anduin. Moreover, he also got Anduin's promise that because of the merit of passing on the information and drugging, his protection fee would be exempted, and he was also promised to give him dividends in the future. So now he and Anduin are completely on the same boat. After a period of quarreling, the young wizards finally parted unhappily. At this time, Yaxley recovered and struggled to get up from the ground. He heard all the arguments in the hub just now. The Purity Committee was finished, and his ideals were instantly shattered in these few hours. With physical pain and inner reluctance, Yaxley staggered out, holding onto the wall. He watched everyone's backs gradually leave. His eyes turned blood red due to negative emotions such as anger and resentment. Coupled with the side effects of using the unforgivable curse on his soul, his whole body seemed to be shrouded in layers of gloom. He once again looked fiercely in the direction of Hogwarts, and disappeared in the wind and snow without looking back. Anduin, who returned to Hogwarts, also reunited with Viren and Vivian in the Forbidden Forest hut. Seeing that he returned unscathed, the tense and worried expressions on their faces gradually relaxed. "How is it? What happened to you? Did Yaxley really attack you? Now that you have escaped, report it to the principal quickly. Attacking students outside the school is not a small crime." After Anduin entered the hut, Viren Higgs hurriedly asked about his situation. In order not to worry the two, Anduin did not explain his plan in detail. They did not know that Anduin had just fought with those pure blood wizards, nor did they know that the other side had sent out so many people. They thought that Anduin had just escaped from the ambush. It was no wonder that they thought so. Anduin was not injured at all, not even a little dust was on his body. No one would have thought that he had just experienced a battle. Anduin did not want to hide anything from the two, so he roughly repeated what happened just now, except for Rosier's matter. "What, they actually sent out so many people to deal with you? And Yaxley actually dared to use the killing curse on you? Doesn't he know what the consequences are?" After listening to Anduin's experience, the two people's expressions changed drastically, and Velen asked in shock. Anduin did not tell them that he had asked Rosier to mix a little madness into Yaxley's potion. He knew that Rosier was responsible for preparing the stimulant potion among the pure blood factions. It was very convenient for him to do this. Madness would make people behave irrationally. It was a low-end version of the madness potion. It was part of his plan to lure Yaxley to use the unforgivable curse. "I don't know about that." Anduin pretended to be ignorant. Who knows what he was thinking? "Anyway, these things are over now, aren't they? But is it really appropriate for you to collect protection fees from these little wizards? This is against school rules. What if they report you to the dean or the principal? Can't you just send them away? Why do you have to do this?" Vivian asked worriedly. Anduin glanced at Vivian and said with a smile, "It seems that you are not very familiar with some of the rules of the wizarding world. Let me ask you a question. How do they know that I am blackmailing them?" "Ah? What do you mean?" Vivian asked, puzzled. Anduin smiled at Vivian, then looked at Velen, motioning him to explain to Vivian. Velen also nodded at this time and looked at Vivian. It has always been very difficult to convict people in the wizarding world. For example, if I hurt you, but if I am not caught on the spot, I can say that the person drank the polar juice potion to impersonate you, or that I was actually controlled by the Imperious curse. For example, if I told on someone, I can say that I was fed a truth serum. Do you understand? Chapter 138 Review. Yes, those Death Eaters who escaped are basically villains who would rather die than surrender, or they are caught in the act, or someone can testify against them in person. Anduin added. Yes, after all, it is too difficult to obtain evidence, and the witnesses must be wizards with a certain authority or a clean record. The nature of those little wizards changed after Yaxley used the killing curse on Anduin. To prove that they were coerced by Anduin, they must admit that they had ambushed Anduin. If they admit it, it is equivalent to admitting that they are accomplices of the murderer. Velen also nodded at this time. If they want to fight to the death, the worst that can happen to me is that I will be expelled, but they are likely to be imprisoned in Azkaban, and I can even push these things to Rosier who collected the debt from them. No one can prove that it was me who did it without personally doing it, so if you are in such a position, what choice should you make? Anduin said with a teasing smile. Hiss. Then won't these pure blood wizards be under your control in the future? What she heard today shocked Vivian. Anduin was really sinister. That depends on their performance next. A dog will jump over the wall when it is desperate. I won't do anything too outrageous. Compared with the so-called protection fee, I am more interested in the knowledge collected by those pure blood families. Which little wizard can have so much money? First propose a price that they can't afford, and then give a substitute plan with a lower cost. I believe that even a fool knows how to choose. Anduin said so. Velen refreshed his impression of Anduin again at this time. He was meticulous, ruthless, and powerful. Those pure blood wizards actually provoked such a person. They were really crazy. Vivian was very appreciative of what Anduin did. Anduin finally let her vent her anger. That disgusting Millie actually dared to show off with her appearance. She deserved to be beaten. With Anduin, who dared to bully her in the future? By the way, if we deal with those guys, will that committee be gone? My Mahjong club will be back, and can I join the Quidditch team? Vivian asked excitedly. That depends on Viren. I will keep an eye on those pure blood wizards. Let our seniors maintain order. I have a lot of things to do. Anduin said. Viren nodded and said, no problem. The half-blood wizards can't stand them. Without the suppression of those guys, I believe Slytherin will soon return to its previous peace. After finishing these tense topics, several people began to enjoy the real Christmas atmosphere. Anduin personally cooked and shared the food with everyone. The next day Anduin returned to the rhythm of living alone. After all, Vivian and Viren were not really going to stay in school during the holidays. Their families were still waiting to reunite with them on Christmas, so they left Hogwarts through the Hogsmeade Fleur network early in the morning. After yesterday's events, Anduin finally put his mind at ease. At the same time, he made a summary of yesterday's battle. He not only analyzed the battle situation from his own perspective, but also from the perspective of the enemy. A lot of the preparations beforehand were not used. The opponent's combat experience, quality, will, and preparation were all very problematic. This may be related to the frequent changes of professors at the Defense Against the Dark Arts class at Hogwarts. The level of teachers varies, which makes the young wizards very unfamiliar with wizards and battles. For example, Professor Genty, except for making sure that all students become depressed in every class, basically can't teach anything nutritious. So if I stand in Yaxley's position and want to defeat another Anduin, what should I do? Assuming that there is no equipment and I don't know what preparations I have, can I be defeated through a reasonable tactical ratio? Anduin pulled out a large piece of parchment and began to draw the battlefield map of yesterday from memory and marked the personnel. There are 17 people on the other side, 5 of them are 6th to 7th grade wizards, 4 are 5th grade wizards, and the remaining 8 are 3rd and 4th grade wizards. If I were to make the arrangements, I would first divide everyone into 5 teams, and assign a senior wizard to command each team, and ambush the personnel in a triangle or trapezoidal formation instead of a linear formation, so that an inner and outer encirclement can be formed. Each team has 3 to 4 people, 1 person is responsible for defenser, 1 to 2 people are responsible for offenser, and 1 person is responsible for interference. If possible, deploy a team as an anti-interference team. Immediately after the battle begins, the senior wizards will first cast the extrasensory spell on themselves. Assuming they all know how to use it, if Anduin is in the encirclement, he will definitely try to break through the encirclement and conduct range interference. The main task at this time is to force him back into the encirclement. The rear team uses sand and rocks or apparition to break the disillusionment spell, while the front team and the 2 wing teams cooperate with each other to launch a saturation volley attack on him along the way. They must grasp the lead time. The first choice of spells is knockback spell and heart barriers. Knockback spell has a fast firing rate and can repel the enemy after hitting. Heart barriers can block the forward direction. The jammer in the team is responsible for using Sticky Feet spell to cast a spell on Anduin's feet, so that it is not easy to cause accidental injuries. In this way, even if the opponent has a speed-enhancing item like me, it is unlikely to completely avoid all spells. It is necessary to use the Iron Armor spell for defenser, and to break or cross the obstacles formed by the Hard Barrier spell through movement or attack spells. Assuming that the enemy breaks through the first layer of encirclement and knocks down the front team member like yesterday, the 2 team members in the back can still attack to fill in the position. At this time, the enemy uses mist and clouds to interfere with the vision of all personnel. Senior wizards can barely sense the enemy's position with the help of the extrasensory spell. The anti-interference team uses the hurricane spell to blow away the thick fog. During this period, all team members should immediately cease fire and form a back-to-back triangle defensive position to prevent sneak attacks by the enemy. Senior wizards who can sense the enemy's position are responsible for reporting the enemy's position in real time. Interference personnel use the Sticky Feet spell to cast a spell in the enemy's approximate position to affect the opponent's displacement. Attackers use ranged spells such as obstacles to make tentative attacks, while defenders are on standby at all times to defend against attacks from both enemies and companions. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 139 Control System. Once they find the enemy approaching or are attacked by a spell, the attack team will completely switch to a defensive posture and communicate with other teams to report their positions and attack them from both sides. The enemies who failed to launch a sneak attack will want to quickly resolve the battle and are likely to use the infrasonic interference amulet. I only hit 2 amulets at the time, so let's assume that I used the props to defeat 2 of the teams. Anduin, who has lost his range attack props, basically has little to do when facing 3 teams of enemies whose vision has been restored. The next step is to continuously focus fire and attack, using positioning and interference spells to continuously oppress the enemy's space. At this time, if the enemy rashly uses extraordinary obstacle spells or high-powered spells, even if they can knock down a team, they will reveal huge flaws. In the end, the enemy will either be knocked down or run out of magic power and lose their combat effectiveness. Of course, this is the case when Anduin does not use his speed advantage to escape. If Yaxley and others have sufficient preparation and tacit cooperation, coupled with reasonable tactics, my chances of winning this battle are not great. After a series of reviews, Anduin couldn't help but sigh. Sure enough, I am still too weak and too rash. When there is not a 100% chance of winning, I still choose to go to war. I must learn lessons in time. The all-terrain armed tactical model also needs to be improved. First of all, the phased boots must be equipped with anti-slip and anti-stick effects. Although the defense amulet was not used this time, one is definitely not enough if it is under concentrated fire. The infrasonic amulet must also be supplemented, and other series of interference amulets must also enter the development stage. The focus will be on this next. The development of temperature and energy storage spells is also approaching the test stage. Fortunately, I made a fortune from those pure blood factions this time, otherwise he could not afford the cost of materials and experimental losses. However, this battle has also gained a lot. The actual combat effect of the spell Flocks of Birds is very strong, and the practice and research of control spells cannot be left behind. When practicing and researching spells, Anduin did not classify them into ordinary spells, evil spells, poison spells, and curses according to the current mainstream. Instead, based on his deep understanding of spells, he classified them into 7 categories according to the differences in the underlying runes: control, elements, changes, thoughts, souls, bloodliness, and foreknowledge. He was originally going to wipe the time and space category, but after learning more about it, he found that the underlying rune of time and space magic was also control, so he classified it into the control category. This classification is actually not accurate. According to his classification method, many magics are composed of several series of runes, but in the eyes of him as a spell scholar, spells are easier to study by classifying them in this way. The Flock of Birds spell that Anduin used in the previous battle was a special technique he developed when studying control spells. It is very different from the ordinary Flock of Birds. Because Anduin has been practicing control spells such as the levitation spell and the obstacle spell for many years, he has a high affinity and proficiency in control runes, so he focuses on studying this type of spell. Just like his Flocks of Birds spell, the ravens summoned are not only stronger individually, but also have a strong connection with Anduin. With his superb control, he can make these ravens perform some difficult tasks, including attacking, defending, picking up items, transmitting information, etc. He is even trying to develop a long-distance monitoring function. Unfortunately, vision sharing is a very advanced magical knowledge, and the current operating radius of the summoned ravens is less than 1 kilometer. However, the performance of this spell in this battle has completely exceeded expectations. This Flocks of Birds can almost resist the attack of dozens of evil spells. At the same time, the vision interference of the elemental cloud and mist spell, the cooperation of the clear water spell and the freezing spell also played a good effect in this practice. The elemental spells were arranged by Anduin into the second echelon of training. As a result, Anduin felt that he did not have enough time. The research and optimization of spells, the production and upgrading of equipment, and the development of existing spells and skills and practice took up all his time. Time passed quickly. Anduin locked himself in the cabin during the Christmas holiday. His daily pastime was to cook and chat with Hagrid. On the first day of the second half of the school year, Anduin returned to the Slytherin common room, and Rosia came to the door. "So you guys are ready to accept reality?" Anduin smiled as he looked at Rosia, who entered his dormitory with bags. "They are not fools. Problems that can be solved with money will not be ruined. I have done everything you told me to do. This is the list. I have marked those guys who refuse to repent." Rosia handed Anduin a piece of parchment. It can be seen that Rosia is in a good mood recently. Anduin took the parchment and glanced at it. Travs is still so unrepentant. By the way, have all the potions mixed with madness been destroyed? I only put some in Yaxley's potion. He threw away the bottle after drinking the potion. I have recycled it today. Don't worry. Rosia didn't dare to openly add ingredients to all the potions. It would be too easy to be exposed. Anduin nodded. It seems that Rosia is still sensible in doing things. Maybe he can train this guy more in the future. After dealing with these tales, Anduin began to check the harvest. These little wizards are quite honest. After inspection, he received 200 gold galleons and 6 magic books as protection fees this month. These books are all rare materials he has never seen before, which makes him very happy. Why is there one less? Anduin counted. There were only 16 people's shares. There were 18 people who participated in the attack that day. Excluding Rosia, there should be 17 people. This. Rosia saw Anduin asking, and after a slight hesitation, he replied, "Yaxley, he ran away." "Run away?" Anduin raised his eyebrows, seemingly not very surprised. "I don't know, that guy has disappeared since he left that day, and he hasn't contacted anyone. I guess he fled for fear of crime. After all, daring to use the unforgivable curse is not a small crime. Now the Aurors outside are hunting down Death Eaters all over the world." Rosia said. "Oh, it's right that he ran away. Why would I go to such great lengths if he didn't run away? But he doesn't even plan to take back his wand, he's decisive. Pay attention to whether Travs has any contact with him. That guy won't give up." Although Yaxley's escape was his calculation, he was cautious and warned. Chapter 140. Remarks on the release. The book will be available at noon tomorrow. From October 15th to 17th, there will be 5 updates every day. Tomorrow's chapter will be released in the afternoon, roughly before 13 o'clock, and then it will return to the rhythm of 3 updates a day, released at 15 o'clock in the afternoon. Please forgive me, I originally wanted to update 5 times a day for a week, but I was a little addicted to watching TI these 2 days, staying up late every day, and my manuscripts are a little insufficient. As a new author, I actually planned to use this book as a practice, so the writing style was very fragmented and the setting was very rustic at the beginning. Please forgive me for my first time writing a book. Originally, I thought I would finish this novel regardless of whether I signed a contract or not, so I started writing very aggressively, starting with 3 updates a day. My purpose was actually to finish the book as soon as possible, and then see if I could sign a contract when I wrote the second book. As a result, I signed that contract directly, and now it is available, so I am very grateful to my editor Liaxing. This gave me more motivation to finish this novel well, and the more I wrote, the more I understood the words and the writing. I could slowly feel myself growing up. When I looked back at the chapters I had written before, I felt so embarrassed and couldn't help wanting to change them. As a result, I had to modify a lot of the content, small settings, and some writing in the beginning of the novel. As a result, the more I modified, the more words I had. Now it's almost 300,000 words. No matter how the book performs, I will finish it as I thought at the beginning. Then I will answer the most frequently asked questions by many friends. Where is the thunder and lightning? Where is the thunder and lightning? In this book, control and thunder and lightning should be understood separately. Control and thunder and lightning are the 2 main abilities developed by the protagonist. The latest chapter 139 also explains that the protagonist mainly developed the control ability in the early stage. Thunder and lightning will be there, and they will be obtained during the summer vacation of the protagonist's 3rd grade. I won't spoil more. Then the control of thunder and lightning also represents the protagonist's style of behavior. After the stage of shrinking and accumulating, many behaviors of the protagonist will become active. Also, everyone will wonder why the protagonist is so slow in the recent conflict, making the Slytherin pure-blood wizard so arrogant. The reason is actually that in the later plots, the leading pure-blood wizards are all very miserable. I'm afraid that some people will think they are pitiful when I write about them, so I added some material in the front to make them more annoying. After the specific plots are all written, I will consider whether to modify them. For now, I will leave it like this. I have read everyone's comments and will refer to many opinions. I have only one advantage, which is to listen to advice. If there are places that everyone is very dissatisfied with, or there are obvious poisonous points, then I will change them. Of course, I will give priority to the foreshadowing of the context, so everyone can post more comments and discuss the future of this book together. Finally, I wish you all good health. All the best. First Order tomorrow. Everyone come. Chapter 141. Infighting, First Order. I understand, but no one knows about that guy now. I asked around during Christmas, but even his family didn't seem to know. Rosie added. Be careful. It's better to be prepared than not. Anduin said, and took out a large bundle of wands from his space bag and handed them to Rosia. These are the wands of those guys. You take them back and return them. I will return the original books to them after I copy them. You go back and tell them that I am a trustworthy person who keeps my promises, so I hope they will do the same. Then he took out 20 gold galleons and handed them to Rosia. This is your share. Don't let your guard down recently. You still need to keep a close eye on those guys. Rosia finally saw that he had some money back, and a smile appeared on his face. He agreed to Anduin's request. After sending Rosia away, Anduin took out Yaxley's wand. It was made of brown mountain pear wood, with a dragon heart tendon core. It was 11 inches long and looked well maintained. It seems that your master has abandoned you. In this case, you will be my spare wand. I hope you will not be as ungrateful as your master. Anduin sneered at the wand. As for Yaxley, since he did not go home, he probably went to join other Death Eaters. Anduin was very satisfied with this. At the same time, in the Hogwarts principal's office, there were also two people talking about Yaxley. So, Yaxley, you lost him? Dumbledore asked while feeding Fawkes with his back to Snape. Yes, after he used the killing curse on Anduin that day, I felt something was wrong. After he left, I kept him in my sight, but Yaxley did not return to the family. Instead, he went to Diagon Alley, where I lost him. I have been trying to find him recently. I can roughly lock the range, but I still can't confirm his location. Snape said coldly. What is your judgment? Dumbledore asked with his head tilted. He was not in a good condition at the time. I was afraid that he would do something irrational, so I followed him closely, but I didn't dare to show my face. However, I used the ESP spell to locate him. With his ability, he couldn't escape my surveillance, even if he apparated. I think someone must be helping him. Snape replied. It's just as I expected. It seems that those exiles still haven't given up. It's a pity that I couldn't catch them. After Yaxley got into trouble, he didn't go to his family first, but to them. It seems that he has completely lost his way. Another student has completely fallen, which makes Dumbledore somewhat sad. TSK. Snape sneered, I see you are really old, and you still have the mood to care about a prospective Death Eater. The Dark Lord has fallen. Now we have to win over every wizard we can, not to mention that he is still a minor. Dumbledore turned and looked at Snape. By the way, have you checked Diagon Alley? Judging from Yaxley's behavior, there should be a Death Eater stronghold there. I don't need your reminder, but there are all kinds of people there, and many properties actually belong to some pure blood families. I'm not in Aurora, so I can't just break in and search. Snape said. Give me the approximate location, and I'll let Moody think of a solution, but the effect may not be great. Millicent is under a lot of pressure right now. Her. Snape looked at Dumbledore puzzledly. Isn't her prestige sky high now? The Dark Lord fell during her term. Now there are rumors outside that she's expected to become one of the greatest ministers of magic in British history, and don't you support her? Indeed, the situation is not bad now, but it is not as optimistic as imagined. The main problem lies within the Ministry of Magic. In the Wizengamot, many families that originally firmly supported her have become neutral because of the fall of the Dark Lord, and even began to help those families that turned to the Death Eaters. After all, they are all pure-blooded, and many Death Eaters cannot even be convicted because of this. Now Millicent is competent with them. Dumbledore frowned slightly. It's the same old trick of checks and balances. It's not surprising that they fight among themselves when there's no external pressure. Snape curled his lips in disdain, and then asked, so according to what you said, those wanted Death Eaters may have been hidden by them. This possibility cannot be ruled out. I am supporting Millicent to put pressure on those families. We can't let them just cover up these criminals. You know, we have many friends, but this will take some time. Dumbledore said. What about Yaxley? Just let him go. Snape asked. I will let the Order of the Phoenix take over his situation, but those little wizards who were bewitched by him must have been scared. Now they are accomplices to murder. Dumbledore smiled slightly. It's all thanks to Anduin. Now they are being blackmailed by our serpentine ghost. Snape paused, and I could feel that he found me that day. Oh? Dumbledore raised his eyebrows. The main reason is that I didn't expect Yaxley to be so bold. When he used the killing curse, I was also shocked and almost stopped him. But Anduin reacted quickly. It should be the time that he noticed my presence. Snape said in a deep voice. Then he dared to blatantly coerce those young wizards. It seems that he wanted to see our reaction. Dumbledore thought for a while and said, it's better not to encourage such things. You should take some time to talk to him. Let's talk about it later. Let them suffer a little. They actually openly split Slytherin. They really don't know how to live or die. Snape was furious when he thought of the mess in the college in the first half of the school year. This is Slytherin's business. Naturally, you are the one who makes the decision. Anduin should also know the limit. Dumbledore didn't ask any more questions about it. He knew his limits. He only used basic spells and self-defense spells to deal with all those little wizards, and didn't let them bleed a drop of blood. He even used potions to heal their wounds afterwards. He handled it so professionally. I bet he must have planned it in advance. Snape recalled that day. From the beginning to the end, Anduin had always been calm and unhurried, as if he had rehearsed it beforehand. How could he not be surprised? However, he didn't know what happened in the hut that day. There was a shielding spell cast inside, and he thought Anduin used potions to heal the wounds of those little wizards. Chapter 142 Incapacitating Curse. Should I say that he is worthy at being a Slytherin? You should be happy, because he is a talent of your college. Dumbledore made a joke and then said, this also proves that he at least knows what he can and cannot do, which is a quality worth affirming. I can't stand such a talent, as long as he doesn't cause me trouble. Snape retorted insincerely, but the joy that flashed in his eyes was still captured by Dumbledore. Anyway, you should take some time to pay attention to Anduin. After Lily and the Longbottom couple, who have a good relationship with him, got into trouble, I was a little worried that he would lose control. At present, it seems that Anduin can still control his emotions. Dumbledore has been well versed in magic for so many years and knows how much impact the drastic changes in emotions have on wizards. Hearing Dumbledore mention Lily's name in advance, Snape's face suddenly darkened. He turned around and left the office after a hum to deal with it. Dumbledore saw this and had to shake his head helplessly. Then he spent a month in peace. Since the pure-blood wizards surrendered, and Yaxley, the 7th-year prefect and student union president, ran away, the atmosphere in Slytherin has changed greatly. In addition, Virum has a good reputation among most half-blood wizards. Under his initiative, the Purity Committee was abolished and the confiscated Muggle items were returned. The pure-blood wizards did not dare to have any opinions at this time. After all, the leader was gone, and Anduin was still there to suppress them. Now the pure-blood wizards basically avoided Anduin when they saw him, even Travis, who was the most jumpy. Without the leader, the academy returned to its former tranquility, and Vivian's Mahjong Club was reopened, and they had a lot of fun in the common room every day. Although the internal of the college was calm, the external conflicts were still fierce. In the most recent Quidditch match, Gryffindor and Slytherin turned into an fight. The two colleges were also very tense. The pure-blood wizards took out all the suffering they had suffered from Anduin on Gryffindor. The pranks between the two colleges almost never stopped. But none of this had anything to do with Anduin. He was worried about a newly developed spell recently. The freezing spell used in the previous battle in Hogsmeade gave him a lot of inspiration, so he took this as a basis, combined with the knowledge accumulated in the study of temperature magic and magic-driven magic, and developed a new spell with special functions. He named this new spell the Incapacitating Spell. He combined the principles of hypothermia and the flow of magic power, and reconstructed a spell that could actively make people lose their magic power. In his conception, wizards or magic items that were cast with this spell would gradually lose their magic power over time until they completely lost their physical strength and magic power. In fact, his initial idea was to develop an energy absorption spell that could absorb other people's magic power for his own use, but this seemed to involve a lot of knowledge about blood magic, which was his current blind spot. The information submitted by the little wizards did contain a lot of information about blood magic, but the accumulation was still insufficient, so he first made a simplified version. But now it was a big troublesome that this spell was difficult to test and experiment with, mainly because there was no test subject. He had already tested the spell on magic items, and now the only thing missing was the living part. Since it was disabled, he had to find an object with magic power. Ordinary small animals would not work. As for magical animals, the magic power reserves of smaller ones were not enough, so it was difficult to observe them. He couldn't find larger ones. There were quite a few magical biological communities outside the Forbidden Forest, but they were taken care of by Hagrid, and he didn't want to make things difficult for Hagrid. In fact, the ideal test subjects are wizards, but it's okay to use acquaintances for training and research. Even if it doesn't work, at least it can strengthen the body. Testing spells is risky, and he still can't do it. Testing on himself is even more impossible. The scene of his previous test of the infrasonic spell is still vivid in his mind. He has learned his lesson. Just when he was in a dilemma, someone knocked on the door of the dormitory. Anduin put his mind back and opened the door. It was Velen. Anduin, don't stay in the room all day. Today is the weekend. Vivian and I have an appointment to go to Hogsmeade to relax. You can come too. Velen was in a good mood recently. The college's Quidditch team was no longer controlled by the Pure Blood faction, and he could go back to being a seeker. Anduin lowered his head and thought for a while. He thought it would be good to relax a little and change his mood, so he nodded and agreed. Since Yaxley was dealt with, Anduin could also move around outside the school relatively safely, but he was used to shutting himself up to do research, so he hadn't really visited Hogsmeade yet. After the three of them gathered, they walked out of Hogwarts. The weather was still cold at this time. Walking on the thick snow, the cold wind blew on their faces, which made them feel refreshed. Along the way, Vivian kept introducing Hogsmeade to Anduin, and she knew every store like the back of her hand, which annoyed Anduin so much that he even missed the taciturn Vivian disguised as Millie. After arriving at Hogsmeade, Vivian started introducing it again like a repeater. Look, that's Zonko's magic joke shop. Last time I bought a dozen bird candies for Charles. I really should let you see how embarrassed he is. There's also Madame Pudderfoot's tea house. Although the decorations there are a bit tacky, the drinks are delicious. Vivian almost repeated what she said on the way here. Anduin, who was strolling with Vivian, seemed to have discovered something and walked straight in one direction. Vivian and Velen were confused and followed him after looking at each other. Anduin walked to the corner of the Hogsmeade Road. In front of him was a shabby house that looked like a bar. What's wrong? What are you doing here? You don't want to go in, do you? Vivian looked at the shabby bar with disgust, and then explained, this is the Pig's Head Bar. The owner is a weirdo, and it's dirty and smelly. Everyone in it is mysteriously covering their faces. I tell you, I won't go in. When Anduin came to this bar, he didn't want to go in and spend money, but he felt that this bar looked very familiar, and it also evoked his past memories. He remembered that before Christmas in his first year, he and Cyrus participated in a secret meeting of the Order of the Phoenix. It was in a shabby storage room, and the style of the place was very similar to this bar. Chapter 143 Looking Glass. Is this the secret place where the Order of the Phoenix gathered at the time? Such a guess emerged in Anduin's mind, and he also became a little curious about this place. Nothing, I'm just a little curious about why such a shabby store hasn't closed down yet. Anduin came back to his senses, turned his head and perfunctorily said something to Vivian, then turned around and prepared to leave. Hectares, don't look at this shabby place, this store has a history of hundreds of years. It is even recorded in the history of magic that the Pig's Head Bar was once the headquarters of the Goblin Rebellion. Vivian is very sensitive to history and said it like a treasure. But before she could finish her boastful words, she found that Anduin ignored her at all and had walked away, which made her so angry that she couldn't help stamping her feet. Anduin withdrew his curiosity and turned to walk into a nearby business. The name of this place is Devise and Band Store, which specializes in various magical equipment and sells various tools. He even saw an alchemical carving knife on a shelf, but looking at the layer of dust on it, it should be that no one is interested in it. The most popular items in the store are the various Quidditch-related equipment. At this time, a bunch of young wizards in the store drooling over the two brooms, the Nimbus 1500 and the Sweep 6 stars, on the display. Vivian and Velen, who followed Anduin in, were also attracted by the flying brooms. But Anduin was not interested in this. When he came in, he just glanced at the price tag of the broom and turned to check other products. Wouldn't it be nice if he bought a room plate with that money? He kept picking up magic props from the shelves, carefully checking them and putting them down. Many of them were directly engraved with runes using the open engraving method. Anduin did draw a lot of inspiration from these props, but there were still many props that used hidden runes. Unless he took out the invulnerable hammer and knocked them a few times, there was no way to study the rune content on them. But he didn't dare to do this. Just looking without buying was already bad, and the boss hated him. If he took a hammer and banged it, he would never be able to enter the store again. It seems that I have to make an alchemical prop that can penetrate materials to observe spells. Otherwise, how can I learn from others in the future? Anduin muttered. After touching all the products on the shelf, he bought a peepscope. The main reason was that the boss looked at him unkindly, so he had to buy something. Secondly, he was very interested in this kind of early warning prop and planned to buy it back to study it carefully. My father told me in a letter that if I can successfully be selected for the Quidditch school team next year, he will give me a Nimbus 1500. After buying the things, Anduin came to Vivian and happened to hear her conversation with Velen. Why buy the Nimbus series? Aren't the brooms of the Sweep series easier to control? The Sweep 6 stars is a good choice in terms of speed and stability. Velen also discussed with Vivian. What do you know? The brooms of the Nimbus series are so flexible. They can make a 360-degree sharp turn anywhere in the air, and the top speed is faster than the Sweep 6 stars. Vivian obviously paid attention to the flying broom for a long time and refuted Velen. Why would a girl like you need such a sensitive broom? You should know that if you don't control it well in the air, you might even be thrown out. Moreover, when playing Quidditch, there will be a lot of interference around. And the Quidditch field is so small that you don't need to push it to the top speed most of the time. And only the position of the seek needs such a fast accelerating and flexible broom. Why would a beater like you ride such a broom? Viram used a Nimbus series broom as a seeker, so he shared his experience very rationally. I don't care, I want it. Look how cool this broom is. The sweeping 6 stars looks stupid and not cool at all. Vivian said, turning her head. This is the real reason for you to buy things, and being cool can only prove that you have a higher wind resistance coefficient. If you want to be cool, it would be more exciting to hold an umbrella when riding a broom. Anduin played with the mirror in his hand, and couldn't help but secretly complain when listening to the discussion between the two. At this moment, the gyroscope in Anduin's hand suddenly reacted, spinning and emitting light, which made him nervous and he quickly looked up and looked around. When he looked through the window, he saw a figure outside the store staring at him with malicious eyes. When the figure outside the window saw Anduin looking at him, he quickly dodged to the side. Travs. Does that guy hate me so much that even the mirror reacted? Although it was only a moment, Anduin still recognized who the figure was. After thinking about it, Anduin raised his eyebrows and suddenly had an idea in his mind, so he turned around and told Velen and Vivian that he had something to do and had to go out for a while, and would meet at the 3 broomsticks later. After hearing what Anduin said, the two did not notice anything unusual and continued to discuss the topic of flying brooms enthusiastically. Anduin put away the peephole and walked out of the shop. He could still see Travs from a distance. He nodded thoughtfully, found a corner where no one was, cast an illusion spell on himself, and controlled his magic to make himself float up, and followed Travs. At this time, Rosie walked out of Honeyduke's candy store with a bag of candy, and happened to see Travs who looked unnatural. What's wrong? Didn't you say you were going to Deviant Banks to buy the latest windproof glasses? Why are you back so soon? Rosie asked curiously when he saw that he had nothing in his hands. Don't mention it. I was unlucky enough to run into the mudblood at Deviant Banks. Damn it. Travs panted and complained. As soon as Rosie heard him say the word mudblood, he knew who he was referring to. Since Christmas, Travs has been avoiding Anduin. Although he was honest when paying protection fees, he never kept his mouth shut. Every day, Rosie could see him cursing Anduin maliciously. If it was popular in the British wizarding world to prick figurines, Anduin's figurines would probably only have needles. Rosie sighed and said, it's better to avoid him. If you have nothing to do, don't provoke him. Otherwise, you'll suffer. Originally, Rosier was just kindly comforting Travs, but the effect was somewhat counterproductive. Humph, I don't accept it. Why can the dirty mudblood be so nonchalant? Instead, we're avoiding him. Have you forgotten how he humiliated us? Travs shouted at Rosier emotionally. Why are you shouting so loudly? Chapter 144 He actually said to Travs. Rosier glanced around and luckily there were no people around. Then he pulled Travs away from the street and walked quickly out of the village. At the same time, he kindly advised, didn't we go to provoke him first? He seems to have never taken the initiative to cause trouble to us. Just be quiet for a while. Haven't you noticed that as long as we have something to do with him, we are always unlucky? That's because the guy is too cunning. Don't let me find a chance, otherwise I will make him die without a burial place. Travs said hatefully. Don't worry about it. Look, he doesn't come to trouble us, and we don't provoke him. Isn't it good to live in peace? Rosier just wanted to be a salted fish quietly. Why is it so difficult? Come on, that guy is actually a bad guy. Who knows how to deal with us? Travs still shouted excitedly. Indeed, but is it really that obvious? It's not obvious. As soon as I saw that guy's face, I knew he was full of bad intentions. Travs was talking, and suddenly realized that something was wrong. It seemed that the voice that just answered was not Rosier's. At this time, both of them realized that something was wrong, and they looked around. At this time, they had gradually left the scope of Hogsmeade. There was no one on the path where they were. There were either snow or woods around. Where did the third person come from? Just when the two were wondering if they had heard it wrong, a figure appeared out of thin air in the open space in front of them. It was Anduin who had solved the disillusionment curse. He followed all the way. Originally, because he was afraid that the footprints would expose him, he used the extraordinary levitation to make himself fly in the air. As a result, he found that he was a little self-indulgent. The two of them were only concerned with nonsense along the way and didn't pay attention to anything at all. Seeing Anduin suddenly appear, Travs, who was full of anger, was ready to draw his wand to attack, but Anduin didn't give him this opportunity at all, and pointed the wand in his hand at a distance. Then he saw that the robes on Travs seemed to come alive, clamping his limbs tightly, and then he was tied up tightly by his own robes like a mummy. You don't even use a normal anti-transfiguration spell on your own equipment, you are really useless. Anduin said coldly. Rosier on the side nervously drew out his wand and pointed it at Anduin, shouting, Don't come over, what do you want to do? Travs, who was tightly wrapped, shouted in a dull voice. Rosier, shoot him, quickly. Anduin turned his wand and fired a spell at Rosier casually, and then Rosier shouted ah and fell backwards. Seeing this, Anduin couldn't help but curl his lips. What a drama queen, he didn't use any strength in the spell just now, and Trav's face was covered. Who are you acting for? Ignoring Rosier, who pretended to faint after falling down hard, Anduin walked towards Travs, who was twisting and struggling like a worm. With a slight flick of his wand, the robe wrapped around Trav's face loosened a hole, revealing Trav's face with a hideous expression. I'm just asking you for a favor today. Don't worry, I'll be gentle, dear. Anduin said with a wicked smile. Travs was about to utter a sweet word, but Anduin pointed at him with his wand, and his lips stuck together tightly, and he could only make a weak woo-woo-woo sound. Rosier lay on the ground, watching Anduin grab Trav's collar and drag him into the depths of the growth beside the road. After a while, he could only hear a faint sad whimper. What? Rosier couldn't help swallowing his saliva, and a strange picture seemed to emerge in his mind. He was originally lying on his buttocks, but he turned over and lay on his back on the ground. After a while, Anduin walked out of the woods with a satisfied look on his face. He was speechless when he saw Rosier still lying there. He wondered if he was cold, lying in the snow like this. He didn't want to disturb Rosier's acting, so he cast an illusion spell on himself again and turned back to Hogsmeade. After a while, Rosier finally couldn't stand the cold anymore, so he got up and walked into the woods to see how Travs was doing. After entering the woods, Rosier found Travs lying on the ground in disheveled clothes and sobbing not far away, which made Rosier shiver. Travs, how are you okay? Rosier walked up and asked carefully. Don't ask. Travs raised his head, staring at Rosier with red eyes, gritted his teeth and said, I swear I will never let that mudblood go, I will never. Rosier, who was frightened by his expression and state, shrank his head and could only nod in agreement. He didn't dare to offend Travs now. On the other side, Anduin, who was walking back in stealth, was holding a notebook, writing and drawing something on it seriously. In addition to the loss of magic power, will a living body also show obvious physical signs such as decreased body temperature, fatigue, weakness in the limbs, and anxiety after being cursed? No, anxiety may be a unique phenomenon of traps, which remains to be confirmed. The speed of magic power loss has been measured through timing. Taking a standard third-grade student as an example, it is roughly 5 minutes. If the casting of Expelliarmus is taken as a standard base number, an ordinary third-grade student can cast Expelliarmus 60 to 70 times in a row without resting in the middle, which is 60 to 70 base numbers. However, this data was previously collected from Charles. After a year of training, his magic power reserves are much stronger than those of wizards of the same age. In this case, the constant is calculated as 50 base numbers, which means that the incapacitating spell can cause the target to lose 10 base numbers per minute, an average of 1 base number every 6 seconds. It takes 6 seconds to lose the magic power of 1 Expelliarmus. From this point of view, the efficiency is not high. It seems that we need to find a way to measure the magic reserve and a standard unit to measure magic. Otherwise, the accuracy of data collection is too low, and it is basically an estimate. How come the magic world has never thought about this issue? It's really a headache. Anduin walked towards the 3 broomsticks while recording and thinking about the test data he had just obtained. At this moment, something caught Anduin's attention. Following his line of sight, he saw a beetle climbing out of a wall, and then passed by the invisible Anduin at a very fast speed, and crawled to a corner across the street. Beetle? There is such a thing in this season. Anduin stared at it for a while in surprise. Chapter 145 Illegal Animagus. However, it was this glance that made him discover something magical. The beetle crawled to the shadow of the corner and hovered there for a while, then suddenly changed into a fashionable young woman. After the young woman glanced around to make sure that no one noticed her, she took out her wand and left the place. Animagus? Animagus is an extremely advanced transfiguration, and Anduin naturally recognized it. You know, Professor McGonagall is an Animagus. However, since the learning conditions of this transfiguration magic are extremely harsh, once failed, it is easy to have unpredictable consequences. Therefore, the Ministry of Magic has expressly prohibited any wizard from learning it privately, and all Animagus need to be registered with the Ministry of Magic. He once read in the Daily Transfiguration Journal that as far as he knows, there are only 7 registered Animagus in the British wizarding world, and he doesn't seem to remember that animals like beetles have been registered, right? After a brief thought, Anduin tilted his head and looked at the place where the Animagus crawled out. It was a private residence. There was only the last name Alcott written on the doorplate, and there was no other information. Anduin tilted his head in confusion, not understanding what was going on. Was she an illegal Animagus thief? But she didn't look like one from the way she was dressed. Was she here to catch your mistress? He shook his head vigorously. It was none of his business, and he didn't intend to meddle in other people's business, so he put what he had just seen behind his mind and continued towards the 3 broomsticks. Velen and Vivian had been waiting for him in the bar for a long time, and even ordered a glass of butterbeer for him in advance. After Anduin was in place, he drank with the 2 of them, tasted the boss's craftsmanship, and then listened to Vivian chattering about Quidditch and her Mahjong club gossip. The 3 of them spent a relaxing weekend together, and Anduin got what he wanted. It really didn't hurt to relax occasionally. And when Anduin saw the new issue of the Daily Prophet on Monday, he finally knew what the beetle he saw that day meant. The secret love story between the former senior official at the Department of Law Enforcement and the Professor of Transfiguration at Hogwarts. So the house I passed by that day was actually Professor McGonagall's home, and the illegal Animagus I saw that day should be Rita Skeeter who wrote this report. She was actually a reporter for the Daily Prophet, and she used Animagus transformation to get gossip. It's really an incredible discovery. Looking at the headlines in the newspaper, Anduin realized that Professor McGonagall, their transfiguration class, had just married Elphinstone Alcott, a former senior official at the Ministry of Magic, and moved to Hogsmeade together. Alcott was Professor McGonagall's boss when she worked in the Department of Law Enforcement of the Ministry of Magic. It seems that the professor accepted Alcott's proposal last summer. The newspapers even reported a lot of privacy about the 2, such as Professor McGonagall insisted on keeping her last name after marriage, and Alcott bought a house in Hogsmeade to make it easier for Professor McGonagall to go to school and work every day. In addition, the newspapers exaggerated the McGonagall couple in various ways, portraying Professor McGonagall as a proud queen, and Alcott as an old liger who had been pursuing the goddess for many years. It's a thorough investigation. This Rita Skeeter is really brave. Isn't she afraid of being hit by a club in the middle of the night? Anduin speculated teasingly. Although he seemed to have accidentally discovered the secret of Rita Skeeter, he was not ready to expose it. He might be able to use this handle in the future. In the past few days, gossip about Professor McGonagall has been spreading in Hogwarts. Professor McGonagall has a dark face all day long. No matter which college students are from, they can sense that the professor is in a bad mood in the Transfiguration class. It is no wonder that not only the privacy of her family has been made public, but also her image has been portrayed as a cold, arrogant and vicious woman. Anyway, Professor McGonagall has not even read the Daily Prophet recently. This report has become a topic of conversation among all the young wizards in Hogwarts for a period of time. Of course, they dare not mention it in front of Professor McGonagall. However, Anduin was surprised when he saw it on the first day, and he didn't pay much attention to it. He had more important things to do. Anduin in the Forbidden Forest hopped round and thought about something. He has been looking up various materials in the library recently, trying to find a way to measure the reserve of magic power. Since he got the inspiration that day, this idea has been circling in his mind. After testing, I found that magic output can be measured, but there seems to be no direct correlation between magic output and magic reserves, so where should I start? Anduin flicked through his experimental notes with a headache, trying to find that thread in this mess. He recently made another alchemical prop that can roughly test the magic output ratio. Each little wizard has different magic output per second according to their own physique and status. He has thought about whether magic output is related to their own reserves, but after testing, he found that there is little correlation. Magic output is only related to the wizard's physique, learning and training level. It seems that I have to seek help. It is not enough to solve such a difficult problem with my own knowledge reserves. Anduin made a decision after a little thought, and then turned out the parchment and prepared to communicate with those spell scholars. Since the publication of his paper on the Echo spell, he has attracted the interest of many scholars in the spell research and alchemy circles, and they've also exchanged letters with each other. One of them even met Anduin once, that is Pandora Lovegood, the wife of Xenophilius Lovegood. Mrs. Lovegood is a spell scholar with a rich knowledge reserve. In addition to knowing Anduin, they soon became academic pen pals. Anduin described his ideas and the difficulties he encountered in his research, and prepared to send them to several scholar pen pals including Professor Bones. He thought that he could learn from others and perhaps he could gain some inspiration from other scholars. Shunfen, your food seems to be too good recently. Be careful of high blood lipids. I'll give you a chance to exercise. These letters, as an owl, Anduin's Shunfen is a more individualistic one. Every time he wants to send a letter, he has to coax it before he can work, which also gives Anduin a headache. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 146 Duel. But just when he promised to give Tailwind a snack after these flights, there was a knock on the door of the cabin. When he opened the door, it was Charles and Velen. Anduin looked at the two of them in confusion. Recently, the training at the few people has basically entered the normal state, and he no longer needs to supervise them. He just checks on everyone every few days and collects test data. What's going on today? What's wrong? Anduin ignored Tailwind's mood, stuffed a stack of envelopes into its mouth, and turned to ask the two. It's like this. Velen spoke first. I have been training for more than half a year, so I want to have another duel to test the results of my training. Charles also nodded in agreement. Oh, does this mean that you are not convinced and want to fight again? I can't see that they are quite competitive. Anduin saw the fighting spirit in their eyes and understood their plan. Anduin thought for a moment and nodded. Okay, let me see how good you are now. Seeing Anduin agreed, the two were also shocked. After so much training, they were very confident in their own strength, especially Velen. He was 2 years higher than Charles. He always felt that the last defeat was due to his poor dueling skills. He was ready to get back at the situation. He also took the initiative to propose this duel. Charles was because the last duel gave him enough confidence. In his eyes, the so-called senior students were just so-so. This time he was ready to let go and try his skills. The three walked out of the hut together and came to the open space next to it. Vivian, Bill, and Ibrahimovic had already prepared candies, drinks, and small benches, waiting to watch the show. Looking at the three people watching, Anduin said speechlessly, "You three should also be serious. This is a good opportunity to observe. When you have made further progress in your training, I will also arrange sparring for you." Yeah. The three people's eyes lit up and they responded to Anduin perfunctorily. Bill even took out a large lollipop and chewed it. "Humph, there will be a time when you will complain in the future." Anduin complained in his heart and turned to look at the two people standing in the field. "I will not impose any restrictions on you in this duel, but you must pay attention to the point. Now you can salute." Anduin shouted to the two people in the field. Well, after the two responded, they drew out their wands and performed a standard duel salute. After the duel, the faces of the two became a little solemn. Obviously, both of them put the other party on an equal footing with themselves. Locked tongue and throat and many obstacles as the battle started, the two chose different spells to start. Charles used locked tongue and throat and tried to use this highly flexible spell to launch the attack first. If the sneak attack was successful, he could directly block Velen's voice spell. Even if it didn't work, he could use this spell with extremely fast trajectory to disrupt Velen's rhythm. Velen chose many obstacles. He knew that Charles had good body skills and wanted to use this spell with a large attack range to force Charles to move. After casting the spell, the two moved instantly. After Anduin's long training, they were able to move and cast spells relatively freely. The two intertwined spells fell into the air. Then there was a series of continuous spells fired at each other. Both of them showed quite good spell casting skills. The attack intervals were very tight, and often several spells were fired from both sides within a few seconds. After nearly 10 seconds of spells, neither side gained any advantage. However, in Anduin's opinion, there were still many differences between the two sides. Charles was obviously inferior to Velen in spell casting accuracy. Velen often used abrupt movements and sudden stops to prevent Charles from catching the lead time. Therefore, there were very few spells that Velen could defend directly, and most of them were dodged. Although this was very physically exhausting, it was very easy to establish an advantage. Although Charles was very flexible, it was easy for Velen to catch the lead time under his high-precision aiming, so he often had to delay his offensive and raise his hand to pick up the spells fired in front of him. Therefore, after a period of tug-of-war, Charles fell into a stalemate with less attack and more defense. Vivian, Bill, Ibrahimovic and others were enjoying the show, watching the two people on the field constantly evading the spell by moving left and right. When they were about to be hit by the spell, they also reacted quickly to use their wands to pick up the spell, and then immediately backhanded back to cast the spell. This instant reaction speed made the three people stunned. At this time, they also understood the purpose of Anduin arranging those training projects for them, such as jumping left and right repeatedly, practicing fast spell casting, etc. The training results of these projects were very intuitively revealed in this duel. Looking back at the two people in the field, after a highly tense spell exchange, both sides felt a little tired. Velen's continuous displacement and sudden stop consumed a lot of physical strength. Now he is slightly out of breath, and Charles is very uncomfortable being suppressed. Charles knows that if this continues, he will definitely lose in the end. After all, he is 2 years younger than Velen, and his magic reserves are definitely not as good as his opponent. If this continues, he will lose strength before Velen. After making up his mind, Charles temporarily suspended his attack and gave priority to defense. Then, in a gap in defense, he pointed his wand at Velen's feet and used a transfiguration spell. Velen, who found that Charles had given up the attack, thought that the opponent could not hold on any longer. With the constant sudden stops and moves, he just stopped and prepared to take a breath. As a result, Charles suddenly cast a spell, and several mud hands suddenly stretched out from Velen's feet, tightly grabbing his feet. Charles was overjoyed to see that the transfiguration spell worked, and hurriedly took the opportunity to launch several magic spells to attack, such as Feint, Quickly Repel, and Disarm You. Several spells were quick and urgent, ready to take down Velen directly. Velen, who found that his feet were trapped, felt a little panic in his heart, but soon forced himself to calm down. Flying sand and rolling stones. Velen was not thrown off balance, nor did he hastily parry the incoming spell. Instead, he took the lead and using a flying sand and rolling stone spell to roll up a cloud of sand and dust and send it towards Charles. He had used this spell before to try to interfere with Charles's vision, but it didn't work well because Charles would use movement to avoid the range of the flying sand. But now Velen wanted to force Charles to move to buy himself some time. Chapter 147 Hiding Curse and Tracking Curse. After using the flying sand and rocks, Velen used the armor spell to take the nearby spells. Charles on the opposite side did as he expected, shielding his eyes with his hands and jumping to the side to avoid the range of the flying sand. Velen took this opportunity to use the restore spell on the soles of his feet to remove the transfiguration spell that locked his legs. Velen, who finally regained his freedom, broke out in a cold sweat. He was almost tripped just now, but now was not the time to relax. Just as he was removing the transfiguration spell, Charles, who had already escaped the range of the flying sand, organized an offensive. Several more spells flew over, and they were connected in a straight line. From the front, only a spell of aura could be seen. Hidden spell. I won't be fooled by such a trick. Velen only took a glance and understood the trick. With Charles' attack speed, it is impossible for him to only fire one spell. There must be a hidden spell behind that spell. If he simply used the armored spell to defend against the hidden spell attack, he would be courting death. Hiding the spell is a spell casting technique that Anduin taught them when he was training them to cast spells. This spell casting technique was not original to Anduin, but a technique he learned from the book 7 Spell Casting Techniques of Barabuse Finkley. When he fought Yaxley before, he had used a volley of bullets to shatter the spring of clear water, which included the technique of hiding the spell. Velen, who also noticed the abnormality, reacted very quickly at this time and moved quickly to avoid it. Anyway, he didn't dare to stay in the same place now. He was not very proficient in the transformation spell, and he couldn't cast spells from such a distance like Charles. In order to prevent being hit again, he could only move constantly. And the string of spells composed of unknown numbers of spells kept moving under Charles' control, following Velen all the time. This technique of tracking spells is also one of the spell casting techniques, but it needs to be guided by eyes all the time, and it will continue to consume magic power. It seems that Charles has decided to go all out. After dodging back and forth, Velen found that he couldn't get rid of the tracking of this string of spells at all. He made up his mind and it seemed that he could only fight hard. Who is afraid of who? Flocks of birds. Velen, who had a plan in mind, once again dodged the spell and immediately turned around and cast a flocks of birds spell. He was not as skilled in controlling spells as Anduin, but he could barely control the flock of birds to move in one direction. At the same time, more than a dozen sparrows summoned rushed towards the spell, but only a few of them hit the aura of the spell that came first. Bang! The leading spell in a string of spells exploded first, which was a small thunder explosion spell. The explosion almost blew up all the flocks of birds that came on, and the sporadic birds that escaped the net also lost control and flew away with their wings. The several spells after the thunder explosion still shot directly at Velen. The blast from the spell almost blinded Velen, but he knew it was a critical moment and he could not afford any hesitation, so he quickly flew to one side, turned around after falling, and did not bother to get up. He lay on the ground and fired 10,000 bullets at the string of spells that had just turned and came towards him. At this time, he was afraid that he would lose his accuracy if he lost his balance, so he used this spell with a wide range and fast firing speed. There are two ways to use the 10,000 bullets spell. The first is to fire projectiles composed of magic power like a shotgun, and the second is to act on some objects, such as stones, and then suddenly start. The stones will split and splash in one direction. This is the method that Anduin used for the clear spring water spell before. Velen used the first method at this time, bang, bang, and the magic power was ejected twice. Although the accuracy was a little off, it still hit the flying spell. Then there were two loud bangs, and two spells in the air were hit one after another. The magic aura was triggered by the explosion of thousands of bullets and dissipated. But before Viram could catch his breath, after the two spells were defeated, there was another spell hidden and continued to shoot at Viram. 4 consecutive spells? Do you have to work so hard? Viram complained in his heart. Viram was exhausted now. According to his estimation, Charles might be even worse than him. Remote control spells are not easy. As long as he can block this spell, he will win. After thinking about it, he sat up and urged the last magic power to support an armor spell. This armor spell was obviously not as strong as the one he used before, but it should not be a problem to block the last spell. Ping! There was another sound of spells hitting each other. As expected, the armor spell blocked the incoming coma spell. But before Velen could be happy, a spell appeared after the disintegrating magic aura. Bang! The last repulsion spell hit Velen's armor spell that was about to disintegrate. The protective shield was shattered after only holding on for less than a second. The powerful impact lifted Velen off the ground, and then he rolled in the air and fell again. Velen, who was lying on the ground, was in a state of confusion, and only his last surprise appeared. 5 consecutive spells? At this time, the 3 people outside the field were shocked and were about to went to the field to rescue, but they were stopped by Anduin. The winner has not been decided yet. Anduin said lightly. Huh. The 3 people were very surprised at this time. Wasn't Velen knocked down? They clearly saw it. Then they turned their heads to look in another direction of the field, but found that Charles was also lying on the ground, unconscious. The 3 had been attracted by Velen's response, and Anduin had actually noticed it early on. In fact, when Velen set up the armor spell, Charles on the other side had already collapsed due to exhaustion. At this time, it depends on who of the 2 people who fell down gets up first. Anduin had sensed before that the injuries of the 2 are not serious, and they were basically tired, so he did not intend to disrupt this duel and was ready to confirm the final winner. Under Anduin's stop, the remaining 3 did not move, but just stared at the 2 people in the venue. After a while, one person moved first. It was Velen. Velen's physical fitness was originally better than Charles, and his injuries after being hit by the impact spell were not serious. It was just that his head was a little confused. Now that he gradually woke up, he struggled to get up from the ground. Well, it seems that Velen won. After Anduin nodded, the 3 people beside him rushed to Charles, and found that he was just exhausted, so they put down their nervousness. Chapter 148 Bloodliner Magic. What's wrong? Wasn't I knocked down? Velen asked, still a little confused, looking at Charles lying not far away. Charles fell before you, and you woke up first, so you won. Anduin said lightly. What? But I still couldn't block his chain tracking spell in the end. Velen and Anduin hurried to Charles' side while talking. At this time, Charles, who was fed a few mouthfuls of tonic by Vivian, finally woke up. After barely getting up, he smiled bitterly and said, "It seems that I lost." Velen, you were making great progress. Charles dared to accept Velen's challenge because he received training a year earlier than Velen and defeated him once, so he actually had a lot of psychological advantages in his heart. He didn't expect Velen to grow to this point in less than a year. Velen was very calm in his flexible body movements, his handling of transfiguration, and his handling of the hidden spell in the end, which made him admire him very much. After hearing what Charles said, Velen shook his head in shame. No, I should be the loser. I am 2 years older than you. You should not have mastered the armor spell yet. I have never seen you use it before. I was exhausted even in such an advantageous situation. It is not really a victory. Winning is winning. Don't hesitate. According to you, if you meet someone younger than you on the battlefield, you have to commit suicide immediately. Anduin looked at the 2 people who were still being humble. He felt speechless and made the final decision. After hearing what Anduin said, Velen could only touch his head awkwardly, but when he thought about it, it was the same reason. He had not thought of this when he challenged Charles before. Senior Charles, the 5 consecutive spells you used at the end were really powerful. Can you teach me? Bill ran out to interrupt at this time and asked the question he was most concerned about. Hearing Bill mention his special move, Charles immediately showed a Versailles face. Haha, that was all taught to me by Anduin, but I'm still not very skilled in controlling it, and it's always hard to turn a corner. Only after a long period of endurance and control can this skill of guiding spells be mastered. It can be seen that Charles is still working very hard in this area. However, hearing that Charles was still so proud, Anduin raised his foot and kicked him in the butt with a serious face. You know that you can't use it well but still use it indiscriminately. Isn't this just being brave? You don't know how to combine the actual situation, use spells incorrectly, and have rigid thinking. This is what I taught you. After saying that, Anduin grabbed a few people and entered the room, reviewed their duel on the blackboard on the wall, and corrected their mistakes one by one. The people who thought that the battle was exciting just now were crestfallen by Anduin's crazy attack, and even Bill and Ibrahimovic lowered their heads nervously. Anduin saw this and realized that he had set too high a standard for them. He sighed and said, "That's enough for today. I've seen your efforts, but there are still many areas that need improvement. I will gradually increase the intensity of training, including Bill and Ibrahimovic. Be prepared." After hearing Anduin's words, everyone felt bitter. They thought they were waiting for us here, but seeing Anduin's serious face, they had no choice but to accept it. After explaining the training matters, Anduin drove them out and took out a record board. The names of Velen and others appeared on it, and there were a lot of numbers with unknown meanings behind the names. The test data of the regular basic training has been collected. Next, we have to look at the test data under extreme conditions. Unfortunately, the magic reserve cannot be quantified, otherwise the data accuracy can be improved. Now we can only judge it according to the estimated value. In fact, he has never given up the research on magic sensitivity in the Magic Club, but he is more greedy. Now after 2 years of training, he has mastered how to improve magic sensitivity, but he has no idea about the quantification of magic reserves and magic sensitivity. He is also preparing to publish a book after studying all of this. Let's discuss it with Professor Flitwick. Maybe the professor can give me some advice. Anduin nodded, packed up and walked out of the hut. Quantification of magic reserves. Professor Flitwick, who was busy preparing for class, put down the paper and pen in his hand and looked up at Anduin at the desk. Not bad. Anduin knew that Professor Flitwick was usually very busy, so he rarely came to disturb him, but his recent research was at a bottleneck. Then Anduin explained his ideas to the professor. Your idea is very unique. Do you want to study the effect of training on magic reserves? Professor Flitwick leaned back in his chair and pondered for a moment, then looked at Anduin. In the wizarding world, not many people are interested in quantifying magic. After all, most wizards have enough magic in their daily lives, so I don't have any research in this area. After a pause, Professor Flitwick felt that it would not be good to discourage Anduin's research enthusiasm, and said, but I can give you some suggestions on the idea. To measure the upper limit of a wizard's magic, you have to use the monitoring rune. Have you tried it? I have tried it, but the manifestation of magic in the wizard's body is very obscure, and the measurement accuracy is not accurate. Anduin said. Then you may have to use some blood magic. Flitwick suggested after a little thought. Blood magic? Yes. Flitwick nodded. Blood magic is a relatively unique category. It is a magic that specializes in studying the physique of magical creatures. Many wizard families have conducted research in this area. Most of them are applied to curses. The research is very difficult and requires a lot of live experiments. Professor Flitwick said this with some hesitation. He glanced at Anduin and said cautiously, if you want to measure the magical reserves in wizards, it is best to use blood magic to study it. However, many of these magics are very evil and dangerous, and the danger is comparable to that of black magic. I do not recommend you to go too deep in this area. After listening to the professor's words, Anduin also had some thoughts in his mind. There were some records of blood magic in the books he collected from those pure blood wizards. Why didn't he think about this before? At the same time, he also heard Professor Flitwick's entanglement, so he said calmly, Professor, don't worry, I won't act rashly. If I encounter any difficulties in studying blood magic, I will report to you as soon as possible. I promise not to mess around. Chapter 149 Summer Vacation. Flitwick thought for a while and nodded. In his eyes, Anduin was a cautious and determined person, so he acquiesced to his research. After having an idea, the next step was to collect information. After Anduin returned to the Slyering common room, he found Rosier and asked him to inform those pure blood wizards that in the future, as long as they provided magic books related to blood magic, each book could be deducted from 1 month's protection fee. Of course, the premise was that Anduin had not read the version. And those wizards who were blackmailed saw that Anduin was very trustworthy and did not mention the previous attack again. The magic books that they had offered could actually be returned. They felt relieved. Many of them even thought of running away like Yaxley at first. Since Anduin did not make any more demands, and the so-called protection fee was to provide some family collections for him to copy, this kind of thing was too easy for those wizards who did not know that they were digging into the family. They even secretly mocked Anduin for being stupid and only knew how to blackmail some useless magic books. By extorting these young wizards, Anduin gained a lot in the next few months. There were hundreds of gold galleons alone, plus various magic books, alchemical materials, etc., which made his pockets full. In terms of spell research, he also made great progress. After several optimizations, the effect of the incapacitating spell has been greatly improved, and the energy storage spell has also entered the experimental stage. However, the research on measuring the magic reserve is still only in the accumulation stage. Many scholars who have communicated with him for a long time have provided him with a lot of ideas for his research, but unfortunately there is no direct help. Even Bones can't do anything about this. The most lacking is the data of live experiments. He dare not do human experiments in school, let alone test himself. The progress in training is also gratifying. Since the duel that day, Anduin has conducted a period of high-intensity special training for everyone who participated in the training. Every day, they squeezed every drop of their physical strength and magic power, and they were exhausted. Vivian was even more resentful. According to her, she had to endure the mental torture of Professor Genty in class and the physical torture of Anduin after class, which made her talk less recently. Anduin and Charles were very happy about Vivian's change. Finally, they didn't have to listen to her nagging every day. The effect of high-intensity training was also very obvious. The data collected by Anduin showed that the people who received special training had visible progress in magic perception, control, and reserves. Compared with the previous regular training, special training made his test data more intuitive. It was a pity that the accuracy of these data was still vague, and the quantitative research of magic had to continue. However, the meal had to be eaten bite by bite. The lack of materials and data prevented the research from being carried out smoothly, and Anduin had no time to continue. Because the third year of school was about to end. After being suppressed in Hogwarts for so long, he didn't plan to stay in school this summer. He planned to go out to visit some friends and try to collect information on blood magic and alchemical materials. And there was one person Anduin had never forgotten, that was Yaxley. He had gone to great lengths to force this guy to flee, just for this moment. However, within the British wizarding world, he still had to be careful and not let others catch him. So I have to play another trick to lure the snake out of its hole. There are so many rules in this crappy place called Britain, which makes people unhappy. Anduin took out a strangely shaped compass from his body and said to himself. Time passed quickly, and the final exams came as scheduled, but this year was a little different, of course not for Anduin, who still passed with perfect grades without any surprise. What was surprising was Vivian. After this period of training, Vivian actually received an E in most subjects, and even an O in charms. Every year, the end of the semester was very painful and tangled for Vivian. In the past, if Anduin hadn't tutored her, she wouldn't have been able to pass the exam. But this year, Vivian stood up. Her results even surprised Professor Flitwick and Professor McGonagall. They thought that this gossip girl had suddenly come to her senses. Ha ha, you didn't see Professor Flitwick's expression when he saw me successfully repair the clock with the repair spell. That was really classic. On the train leaving Hogwarts, Vivian showed off to Charles and Velen with great interest. Anduin couldn't help but roll his eyes at her. This girl had mentioned this for the 8th time. He didn't expect that Professor Flitwick would actually use the clock he gave him the year before to take the final exam and even broke the clock. Didn't the professor like giving clocks? That proves that the training program arranged for you is quite effective. You have to increase the amount of training next school year to consolidate it. Anduin said lightly. Vivian wanted to slap herself in the face. She was really talking about something that was not related to the topic. Charles in the carriage also glanced at Vivian speechlessly and changed the subject, saying, "This year's Professor Genty is really despairing. In the final exam, he actually asked us to deal with Bogarts. It was almost time for the holiday, but he still asked us to watch such a scary thing." Anduin nodded. Charles' words reminded him of the big pot of starry sky that the Bogart turned into during the final exam, and his stomach suddenly churned. That's right. Dealing with Bogart should be a happy and joyful thing, but he even made us depressed. Vivian followed the topic and talked about the defense against the dark arts class. Thinking of the extremely negative Professor Genty, Anduin was curious whether he would be cursed after teaching the defense against the dark arts class in school for a year. He heard from the seniors in the curse club that the professor seemed to have become like this today because of the curse. Charles, who was standing next to him, saw him in a daze and interrupted. "Anduin, where are you going this summer? Do you want to spend the vacation at my house?" "Forget it." Anduin shook his head. "I promised Madame Longbottom that I would go to her place to accompany her this summer. It's not easy for her to take care of the whole family alone. I have to go and help." Hearing Anduin mention the Longbottom family, Charles felt a little depressed. Then, as if he remembered something, he said angrily, "The murderer of the Travs family escaped trial by relying on the protection of his family. It's really hateful." Chapter 150. Promise with Neville. Is it the uncle of Sample Travs? Anduin recalled the gloomy face he had seen at the train station. Why? Didn't the McKinnon family accuse him? He attacked your family twice, and once, Vivian blurted out in a hurry, but suddenly remembered the accident of Aunt Charles, so she had to stop. It's because his brother is a member of the Whizzing Jammock Council. That bastard only knows how to protect those criminals and escape the crime on the grounds of being controlled by the Imperious curse. Charles became more and more angry as he thought about it. All criminals must be tried by the whizzing Jamot, and Sample Trav's father is one of the councillors. With his mediation, his Death Eater brother was rescued at a small cost. What's his name? Anduin asked softly with narrowed eyes. Torquil Travs. It is said that it is named after his ancestor who once served as the director of the law enforcement department, my pa. Charles said with disdain. I remember it. Anduin said in a soft voice. Velen glanced at him in surprise. He didn't know why Anduin asked his name, but he felt something was wrong. Time passed quickly in the chatter of the crowd, and the train arrived soon. After getting off the train, Anduin tilted his head and reminded the others, again, you can't fall behind in basic training during the summer vacation. After the start of the next school year, I will check your progress. If anyone falls behind, don't blame me for being rude. The others looked at Anduin and nodded helplessly, even Velen. He felt that he had experienced more this year than in the past 4 years. However, when Anduin turned his head and left, the few people who were still standing there looked at each other tacitly. The meaning was very simple. If we want to slack off, we can slack off together. By then, everyone's level will be about the same, and Anduin won't be able to tell. Well, a good team is one that shares the same hardships and happiness. Anduin, who left alone, didn't care about the little trips in the hearts of the few people. He took the night bus again and came to the village of Ottery Street, Catpole. It seems I have to find time to learn apparition. This broken bus is really annoying. Feeling the churning in his stomach, Anduin thought helplessly. However, thinking of the side effects of learning this magic, he calmed down again. It was too dangerous to learn apparition alone, so he had to practice with the help of others. Anduin, who had collected his thoughts, appeared at the door of Longbottom's house again, and then heard Augusta's roar in the house. Neville. How many times have I told you not to put specimens in your mouth? Don't you understand? Anduin pouted. The old woman's temper was still as irritable as ever. After thinking about it, he knocked on the door. Oh, Anduin, I haven't seen you for a long time. You have grown taller and more handsome. Augusta, wearing an apron, looked about the same as before, except that there were a few more wrinkles and hackedness in her eyebrows, but she was still very happy to greet Anduin after seeing him. Hello, Mrs. Longbottom. I'm really sorry that I didn't come to see you until after such a long time. From what you said, I also know your situation. The year after the disappearance of you know who was the most chaotic year. Those desperados were all crazy and causing trouble everywhere. Even, Augusta seemed to recall some bad memories. His voice gradually weakened, and then he shook his head gently. Let's not talk about this. Come in. After 2 years, Anduin still felt a little uncomfortable when he walked into the familiar house again. The family that was originally happy now only had 2 people, old and young. The 3-year-old Neville in the living room had just been scolded by his grandmother. There were some tears in his eyes. He was suddenly frightened when he saw a stranger walking towards him, and he couldn't help crying. This little Neville would cry every time he saw him. Anduin even began to doubt whether there was something wrong with him. Don't cry, this is Uncle Wilson, he held you in his arms when you were little, don't you remember? Augusta was so angry at the crying little Neville that she scolded him harshly. Seeing that his grandmother was angry with him again, little Neville cried even harder, and Anduin didn't know what to do for a while. Mrs. Longbottom, Neville is still young, it's normal for him to be afraid of strangers, so don't be so harsh on him. Anduin comforted. Humph, the boys in the Longbottom family are all men and heroes. What's wrong with always being timid? I'm doing this for his own good. Okay, you're familiar with this place, I won't greet you, I'll go prepare dinner first. After saying that, Augusta glared at Neville seriously again, and walked into the kitchen swiftly. Anduin looked at the now empty living room, walked slowly to little Neville, took out a handkerchief to help Neville wipe the tears from his face, and then sighed softly. Neville, let me introduce myself again. I'm Anduin Wilson. It doesn't matter if you call me big brother or uncle. I'm a friend of your parents. Anduin said to Neville in a gentle voice. Perhaps it was Anduin's gentle tone that made Neville relax his nervous mood, or it might be because Augusta was not watching him next to him. Neville's crying gradually became smaller, and then he looked at Anduin with a slightly curious expression. Are Uncle and Mom and Dad good friends? Uncle, do you know where my parents are? I miss them. Neville widened his eyes and asked in a baby voice. At this, Anduin was silent when he heard Neville's question. After thinking for a while, he picked up Neville, put him on the sofa in the living room, and sat next to him. Your parents are heroes. They are usually very busy. It will take some time for them to come back to see you. Anduin said after thinking for a while. But I miss them. Uncle, can you help me find them? Without them, Neville will be scared at night. Neville's eyes widened and looked straight at Anduin. Find them. Anduin was stunned for a moment, then looked at Neville with a firm look. Okay, I promise you, Uncle will definitely help you find them, definitely. Then let's make a pinky promise. Seeing the uncle in front of him, the angular face gave him full confidence, and he stretched out his right pinky and smiled. Yes, let's make a pinky promise. Anduin also stretched out his right hand and made a pinky promise with little Neville. Immediately, little Neville had full trust in him, and soon he started to play happily in front of him. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.